It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Sam Davis here with Andrew Galata. Dylan Balsamo will join us later on in the show as well with some headlines. With you on this fine Saturday evening from 11 to 2 a.m. on 90.7 FM, Facebook Live, and YouTube. Andrew, when I say your name, Dylan's name, of course, Alex Bowles, our producer as well. I can't help but smile. Just a very fun group to be talking sports with over the next 3 hours. Happy and very excited to be with you guys tonight. Andrew, how you doing?
Doing great. Right now, I think we, going to have a great show. So much to talk about. MLB, we have two teams right now in New York playing pretty solid baseball. Mets obviously playing better, but the Yankees, I know they're going to have a lot of, criticism with them, but they're still like 3 games over 500, which if the Mets were 3 games over 500, I'd still take at this point, to be honest with you. NBA playoffs, always really fun, getting to that conference finals area. It gets, nice dicey of the Islanders in the conference finals for hockey. And then, for me as a golf fan, you have the US Open, which is obviously one of the biggest weekends in golf. So for me, it's like 5 sports that I like to watch all at once. It makes for a very packed weekend.
Yeah, you said it. We got a packed show on tap for you this evening. Happy Father's Day weekend. Happy Juneteenth. Lots of course, baseball, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, US Open golf. You mentioned it all. Lots to get into. But we're going to start the show in the 11 o'clock hour by bringing in Dylan, and we're going to talk some Mets baseball. Of course, me and Dylan being beat reporters and Andrew being a huge fan, we got to start the show with the Mets. They continue to sit in first place very comfortably. They're getting guys like Jeff McNeil's coming back soon. Conforto and Nimmo as well seem to be on the way in the near future. And then, of course, they got the best pitcher on the planet in Jacob deGrom. But that's where maybe a little bit of concern. Of course, deGrom left after only 3 innings in his last start. He's not going to go on the IL. At least it doesn't seem like that at the moment. But, you got to be maybe a little bit concerned just with how good he is. And also kind of a big stretch for the Mets coming up here. Lots of divisional games. So, we're going to get into it in a little while, Andrew. But, just gauge your concern here with Jacob deGrom in terms of his injury.
So first of all, happy birthday to Jacob deGrom. It's his birthday today.
I didn't know that. There we go. Got to get that.
Had to bring that up. It's a little unfortunate that he's a little banged up, but it is his birthday. So happy birthday to him here. And I'm not that concerned right now. I think, if he misses a start, it's not that big of a deal. I played more on the cautious side because he's Jacob deGrom. You need him in this postseason. If the Mets get there, you need him down the stretch. And I think at this point, the Mets should at least be there down the stretch. And you're going to need deGrom to go 7 innings, 8 innings. And he's just such a weapon for a team, especially, when we get to the postseason. He's just such a weapon because he goes out there. He gives you every chance to win in the world. 7 innings. If you score 1 run, he goes 8 innings and you have Diaz for the 9th, you basically won the game. And I don't know another pitcher, definitely right now you can't say that, where it's just to that certainty. But you go back in history, there are only a few seasons where you get this. And with deGrom, it's every time you watch him, you're watching greatness. And I know you've got a ton of chances to watch him in person.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm just not that worried. And also, you got to say, yes, he's had the injuries, but he's pitching so well. He's pitching so well. You talk about it with other guys and Mets pitchers, they're kind of known for injuries with Harvey and the other guys. But even when Harvey and he was injured, he was getting deteriorated. He wasn't pitching well. And deGrom is you want to say the best season of all time. It's really that crazy. Right now, I'm just not that worried.
Yeah, I know the word precautionary gets thrown around a ton, and I feel like Mets fans hate hearing that word now because Jacob deGrom, continues to leave games that's what seems like the reason. But it shows that I mean, these injuries are all separate, all like different parts of his body, which I guess is a little confusing. Maybe not concerning, but just like confusing. I don't know how you can have so many different parts of your body all at the same time. And then he still goes out, like you said, and 6 innings in that start when he left with the tendonitis and the flexor tendonitis, 3 innings, but he struck out 8 guys when he left with the shoulder soreness there. So he continues to pitch well, and for me, that shows that these injuries aren't massive, they aren't huge. They're little minor things that, you got to protect him for down the stretch, like you said. I don't think you can guarantee a playoff run for this Mets team yet, but I think you can at least say, but more likely than not,
they should be playing
stretch,
meaningful games in August and September.
Exactly.
And you would like DeGrom to pitch those games.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as Mets, I'll speak for you, Andrew, as a Mets fan, you'll take meaningful games in August.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
This team is very exciting, obviously. So shifting over, of course, after the Mets, we'll talk a little bit about the New York Yankees, who are, I guess, starting to look a little better, maybe offensively, starting to pick things up. At least in the Blue Jays series, they looked better. But they've underperformed all year. That's just, that's a fact at this point. Earlier, it was kind of weird because going into the year, the talk on this Yankees team was always the pitching is weak. The starting pitching needs to get better. And this lineup will be fine. This lineup is going to have to hit. But early in the year, the pitching was overperforming. The pitching was basically carrying this team. Kluber was pitching well, which I think was a surprise. Now he's hurt, and Severino, with his setback, that's another tough injury for this pitching staff. But at first, that was the case. Now it seems like the pitching staff is starting to hit reality a little bit more, maybe starting to struggle. But this lineup continues to just be inconsistent, and I think that's really the word with this Yankees team. They're inconsistent. They'll have a really good series, and then all of a sudden, things will start to turn what seems like back to normal, like 500 baseball. But to be honest, this Yankees team should not be playing 500 baseball. I think that's just like a common statement. This team was projected to win the division. They were projected to go far in the playoffs. And I don't know, like 500 baseball doesn't seem like it's cutting it in New York.
This is it's supposed to be a World Series team. And yeah, they're playing 500 ball. And, kind of you start to question, is the window of this group starting to close in on itself? And that's something that, it's interesting to me. I think they could open it up more if they added in free agency or trading in the offseason. They didn't. They added a little bit, but nothing to what the New York Yankees standard is. See what maybe they'll add now at the deadline. And can they elongate that window for a few more seasons? Or if not, what are they going to do with Judge? What are you going to do with the Stanton contract? There are some areas where it's going to be interesting to see how the Yankees try to elongate this World Series window. Everyone thought they'd still be in it this year, but last year, look, they lost in the ALDS. This year, they're 3 games over 500, third in the AL East. Who knows if they even made the playoffs? You're going to have to, I think they're going to have to make some, moves to really be a World Series contender, and we'll see if they can, elongate that window.
Yeah, so after our Yankees talk, we'll shift to more Yankees talk. Me and Dylan got the chance to sit down with Justin Shackil, Yankees reporter. Great conversation there, WFUV Sports alum. Talked all about the Yankees, like you said, the deadline moves, what they might be looking to do going forward there, looking to turn around their season, of course. So that's a great interview to close out the first hour. Then heading into some NBA headlines, Dylan will stick around. Starting off the midnight hour, we've got a lot going on in the NBA. Kemba Walker trade, of course. Chris Paul on the COVID list. Injuries in general surrounding the league that you might include Chris Paul in. Obviously Kawhi Leonard is a big one. Kyrie Irving, even James Harden, who's kind of still lingering from that injury. But also a couple of great games on Friday night in the playoffs, of course. The 76ers beat the Hawks, forcing Game 7. And the Clippers, a surprise to us all, I would say, defeating the Jazz, moving to the Western Conference Finals, facing off with the Suns. 25-point lead. 25-point lead. I had to say it twice just to make sure you heard me here. A race
without Kawhi Leonard too.
Terrence Mann is the new Kawhi Leonard, I guess. I guess, Andrew, are you surprised at the way the Clippers have been playing without Kawhi, like we just said?
Oh yeah, it's extremely impressive. I like this Clippers team, going into the playoffs, but it wasn't because of, Terrence Mann, let's put it that way. It's because of Kawhi and, Paul George, obviously. And look, they've shown a lot. I mean, I picked the Clippers to go to the Western Conference Finals, same with the Suns. So I'm happy. My 2 picks were there here, going into this next series, but give it off to the Clippers. I don't know if this is like sustainable without Kawhi, but for them to fight through that series, the Jazz, they're a really good team. They won 52 games. I mean, you got to give them a ton of credit. Yes, I'm surprised. And, it's something that you got to give a lot of credit to Paul George, the way their depth is played, and then also Ty Lue.
It's funny because this Clippers team in the past has kind of underperformed, and Paul George is one of those guys that, the playoff P term that's been used quite a lot, or especially in the bubble, certainly struggled, but he seemed to really taken on a better role, taken on that kind of leader role with Kawhi down, playing a lot better basketball. This Clippers team in general, just playing better basketball. It seems like they're finally living up to, what we kind of expected, or maybe what that organization has expected for the last couple of years, getting to the Western Conference Finals. And now they'll face off with a very good Suns team. Obviously, Chris Paul being in the lineup and being back would be huge for them. They kind of need that, so that's something to look out for in the future as well. And then, of course, we're going to keep the NBA content rolling. Me and Dylan, after Dylan's headlines, are going to sit down with Brandon Scoopy Robinson, a great guest, NBA analyst for Bally Sports. Just a wonderful guy, really fun to talk to. We had a pleasure talking all things NBA with him. We got into, of course, the playoffs and then all the news going on, off-season trades, all that sort of stuff with the NBA. Very exciting time for that sport. So finishing off in the final hour, though, we've got Dylan coming back for some baseball and some golf headlines. College World Series is underway. The U.S. Open is underway. And then, of course, the sticky substance issue that just never goes away. It seems like, at least for me, I've talked about it a lot through FUV and our podcasts, and obviously now we're going to talk about it here. But it's an important issue, and I know, Andrew, you really wanted to talk about it. I think we have similar opinions on this whole thing. I don't want you to give away your opinion too much, but I know that for me, I liked it. I liked what the MLB's doing. I like that they're really trying to improve the game to what was terrible offensive production, at least in the early part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a good move to stop guys from blatantly cheating. That's what it was getting to. I think, there's something for guys trying to hide it, and we've kind of seen that. I think that's kind of part of, baseball's history, and, maybe the little, the sunscreen and sweat, whatever they do, the sunscreen and rosin, whatever. But it was getting to a point where it was like, it was so blatant. It was like, sometimes, it was like the Michael Pineda stuff where, he got thrown out of that game against the Red Sox.
I remember that well. As a Red Sox fan.
Yeah. So, it was getting to a point where, and like you talked about, hitting, as a Mets fan, you're kind of used to no hitting, but not across the whole league. And that's something that, it's just something, the way that, the outcry, I guess, against it's been polarizing on both sides between pitchers, hitters. The players union really is split, which is, I think, interesting. Definitely, it's not surprising, I guess, for the pitchers, but it's something that, we'll get into for sure. And then, U.S. Open, always love talking about some golf. And I know it's not like, Phil's not, it's not going to be that type of storyline where, last major, but still should be.
You might have a Koepka and DeChambeau story. Who knows?
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to. Golf is always fun to talk about. I love any excuse we have to talk about golf. I love to bring it up. So, and then, of course, we have to get into, before we end the show, the NHL playoffs, of course, well underway. The Islanders in a big series rematch with the Tampa Bay Lightning from the Eastern Conference Finals last season. The barn has been rocking. That's no surprise. That's the one thing you could have definitely said that's going to happen going into this series. But the Isles, might need a little help, especially offensively. That's just been the big question. That's always been the concern with this team, is the offensive firepower, kind of keeping up with a team like the Lightning. They couldn't really do it last year. Does anything change this year? What do they have to do to change that?
Yeah, look, the Islanders, they're down 2-1, so it's not the end of the world. They were down 2-1 against the Bruins, 2-1 against the Pens. I just think, you got to be able to score consistently, and they've been able to kind of really change some things when they were down 2-1, and then, give it to Barry Trotz. He's such a good coach, and he's been able to out-coach teams, and, that we'll see if it continues against the Lightning and what, it's going to be something. I think this, it's going to be interesting to see how the series flips or doesn't flip, and if it's different than last year, because right now it looks pretty similar to how it went down last year. Lightning looked like the better team, but can he take advantage of maybe some, matchups that he feels. I mean, Barzal's been playing so well. So you're hoping to get him the puck more and, hoping to get guys with him that can play well, because that's been an issue. Barzal's been setting up a lot of plays, but no one to finish them. And that's, going to be something we're going to get into for sure, in that last segment.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an Isles fan, you don't want the series to look exactly like last year because, of course, we know how that ended. So definitely an exciting time in the NHL playoffs. We'll also touch a little bit on the other series, of course, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Canadiens out there. And I use air quotes, basically the Western Conference, even though it really isn't right now with the new division alignment. But we got a lot to get into in this show, as you've seen. But we're going to, I think, take a quick break here. We're going to be back with Dylan Balsamo to talk New York Mets baseball. Stick around, an awesome show. You are listening to One on One. We'll be right back.
One-on-One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Sam Davis, Andrew Galata, and Dylan Balsamo will join us here. Time to get into an exciting Mets team playing very well right now. Of course, first place, like I mentioned, getting some starters back from injury, and the cloud of concern, the only cloud of concern is Jacob deGrom, and that slight injury, I'm going to call it slight. Andrew, I just asked Andrew what his thoughts were on it. Dylan, what are your thoughts on deGrom's injury right now and the state of it?
Well, something Andrew mentioned that caught my attention was how Mets fans are probably getting very annoyed by the use of the word precaution, which is unfortunate because that's exactly what I was going to say. It is very much and look, here's the thing about deGrom. I think he is very much shown during his career he's a guy who is himself overly precautious. And even before he was the best pitcher on the planet, when he was just one of the best pitchers on the planet. You know what I mean? So, when there's three separate injuries that happen, three separate injuries, we'll put injuries in air quotes, it is, I think for him, much more of a matter of I'm kind of nervous because I'm having the best season of my life, and I know this is the best it's ever going to be. I think there's a part of him that is having a psychological effect on his physical health, and as we know, those two things are much more related than we tend to give him credit for. So for me, it's deGrom, getting a handle on his nerves, and who wouldn't be nervous when you have a .54 ERA to maintain, and you're the king of New York City. And you have the best batting average on your team too. And there's just so much for him to be nervous about. I can understand it. And, I think that has resulted in something physical for him. And it has happened in multiple places. So, if he's got to miss a start, like people keep saying, fine. Let's take care of this now. I think there's also a part of him, not to drag on, but, there is a slight chance that he might have to pitch deep into the playoffs this year. More of a chance than there's been in 6 years. So I think there's also part of him that is preparing for, especially after a 60-game season, where he unfortunately did not win the Cy Young Award, which is how we now measure his success. A 60-game season, that's a big turnaround. We've seen the amount of injuries all over baseball. It's him just looking out for himself, and I think he's being extra nervous and extra precautious. That's fine.
DeGrom knows his body. I would like to add that he's always been a pitcher. Like he even did it like when it was a 6 innings. He pitched 6 innings. Like, oh, I have the little tendonitis. I mean, I do think that if this happened in the playoffs, he'd pitch through it, which is I think what he would do. So I'm completely fine if he misses 1 or 2 starts in June, if that means him pitching in August and September.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned the tendonitis, because I was obviously thank you to FUV being able to, me and Dylan, of course, beat reporting throughout the year. For whatever reason it is, I always get to see Jacob deGrom starts. It's just like luck of the draw. It just happens. I feel terrible for Dylan because obviously of how fun it is to watch Jacob deGrom pitch. But I did see his start when he left. I think it was after 6 innings with the tendonitis. And then I saw the press conferences after that. Rojas and deGrom said, this is not a concern. We're not worried. Seemed extremely precautionary, using that word again. Then the following week, comes, he makes his normal start after 5 days. This time he goes 3 innings and comes out. And now it's like, we really want to go through that same process again of everyone saying, this is fine. There's no real concern here, which is exactly what kind of Rojas and deGrom said. Maybe Rojas was a little more concerned and saying we'll take it day by day. But the no IL stint, I know you don't want to put him on the IL, but for me, there's no problem with him missing a start. I really don't see any problem with that. I know the Mets have a ton of doubleheaders coming up, a lot of games, but they need starting pitching. But obviously, the biggest concern is keeping him healthy down the stretch and come playoff time. And to me, it's concerning because, first of all, it's Jacob deGrom. And second of all, it's a very similar scenario to what had just happened. So who's to say he's not going to leave his next start early again with something else even, because it's back-to-back starts where very similar things are happening. He'll throw a bullpen, he'll feel fine. Everything coming up to the game, he'll feel fine. And then all of a sudden he ramps it up and then he starts to feel something and he's got to leave the game. So I don't know what the solution is. Maybe you have him skip a start and maybe try a little simulated start or something where at least he ramps it up like he is starting. That way you can feel it out and see, is this issue going to come back? I'm not sure exactly what the answer is, but I think missing a start, maybe even missing 2, isn't the end of the world when Jacob deGrom, best pitcher on the planet, you want him healthy down the stretch and come playoff time.
I also think it's worth noting here. For one thing, yesterday, he was, shagging fly balls in the outfield during that practice. He was doing all of his normal between start routines.
Yeah.
So that's worth noting. But here's the thing. The Mets need to eventually make a decision about this within the next day or 2. If he's going to miss his start or if he's going to go to the IL, because you can't really not do either of them. Because if he's going to make a start, well, then he should make a start. I don't know if that's the right move. But, if he's not going to make a start and, everyone's going to go, oh, another bullpen day. Well, you're going to need that extra arm for the bullpen day. So put him on the IL. Like you can't tread water here. You gotta get out or you gotta dive in.
Yeah, especially, sorry to cut you off, Andrew, but especially right now, because this Mets team they're playing a ton of doubleheaders right now. They're trying to catch up because they're behind. They're playing a ton of divisional games. You need the bullpen. You need the bullpen badly going up in this stretch because they're going to be kind of worn out already. You're going to need to rely on some guys in AAA coming up, some arms. So it's not a big deal to me. I mean, you just got to make a decision. Starting it wouldn't be the smartest decision, in my opinion, but I agree with you, Dylan. You just got to kind of pull the trigger here and make a decision.
I will say if he's fine, I'd like him to start. I mean, I'm not gonna and I don't know what Jacob deGrom's feeling. I mean, like I'm not Jacob deGrom, so if he's feeling though something, I would even if it was the littlest tendonitis or whatever, I feel like he should probably you take it safe. But if he feels fine, I mean, this is like the Giancarlo Stanton thing with the Yankees. Like I mean, I'd like him to pitch if he's fine, and then it's at some point if he's fine, you're gonna have him pitch. He's gonna have to go deep into games or like whatever it ends up being, which I'd like to do. I mean, it's not April, it's still June. And, to your point about they're playing all these double headers, it'd be a lot nicer if deGrom's pitching one of those games or, whatever, than if it's someone else in AAA. But I will say if he has to miss games, I think when you look at the rest of this rotation, you have Stroman, he's going 7 innings every single time out. And it's like almost effortless out there. He's such a great 1-2 punch with deGrom because he's striking out everybody in the world. And Stroman, he's the guy getting double plays every time and ground ball pitcher. And then you have Taijuan Walker, who's also going 7 innings, or 6 innings every time. And even now you have Lucchesi pitching really well over the last 5 stars. He pitched well last night. So it wouldn't be the end of the world, I think, if deGrom, missed a start or two, even if they played all these double headers. But if he is healthy and he feels completely fine, I feel like you got to pitch him. I mean, we're going to sit him for no reason. I feel like, maybe if you really want to be like, he's having the best season ever. It's so difficult to not pitch him when he could literally every night throw a no-hitter. And, you feel like you're watching greatness. It's hard if he's 100% healthy to take that away and give you almost an automatic win.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the rotation. We can't, it seems like we're being negative about this Mets team, but we can't be because look at that rotation. Like you said, Stroman has been pitching unbelievable. He's basically like an ace right now. Even Taijuan Walker is looking like an ace on another staff. So those guys are pitching very well. Carrasco, if he comes back and he's healthy, I think this rotation is extremely tough to beat. I mean, watch out for any team, either down the stretch or maybe even in the playoffs, that has to face off with a rotation like this. I mean, good luck. And then you got, staying with the injury kind of theme here, we got some guys coming back, some starters. Jeff McNeil will be back very shortly. Conforto and Nimmo seem like they're on the way back too as well in the near future. And I think this presents an interesting kind of situation for the manager, Luis Rojas, because I think in his situation, you have guys right now, Friday night, okay, and even before that as well, the Mets haven't really scored too much and the offense has been struggling. But in general, this lineup has been producing at least decently well and winning a lot of ball games. Guys like VR, Kevin Pillar, bench players, to be honest, even Guillorme, that have been really producing and helping this team win. You get Nimmo, you get Conforto, and you get McNeil back. Do you rush to put them in the lineup? Let's say these guys start to struggle. These are starters, but they're struggling. I don't know. I think it's a good problem to have, but it's a tricky situation because you have guys in the lineup right now that are winning, that are producing a first place ball club. And if I were Rojas, I wouldn't be so quick to kind of pull those guys and mess up any sort of flow, especially if Nimmo, Conforto, or McNeil are going to struggle a little bit coming back because they haven't played in a while. So I don't know what you think about this, Andrew, but for me, I think it's an interesting situation that Rojas is in right now.
Yeah, the two big ones I think would be Nimmo and Pillar, but you could always platoon them, and I would probably do that, because you play Pillar against the lefties and Nimmo against the righties, and then the third base is going to be, I think, the big one, VR and JD Davis, and right now I'm giving it to VR. The way VR can field his position, first of all, is such sure hands. And he's been hitting really well, getting some clutch hits. I think McNeil's going to play every day over a guy like Jose Peraza. Peraza, I think we've seen
Guillorme, though.
Guillorme, I think, is more of a, I don't know. I still rather have and I don't think McNeil's going to come back and, you're hoping he doesn't hit 220.
That's true.
He's the former all-star. Same with Conforto. These guys are all-stars or were all-stars before the injuries. You're hoping they start to produce, and this Mets offense was supposed to be, they weren't coming into the year supposed to be bad. They were supposed to be a really solid offense. You could probably say top 5 in the NL, and it just hasn't been there because of the injuries. You're hoping, with Conforto, with Nimmo, with McNeil, and then also you're hoping Lindor can finally get you back to that all-star status as well, hopefully eventually, and then same with Pete Alonso. And you're hoping this offense gets hot. And maybe that, go back to the DeGrom thing. Maybe if your offense is scoring 5 runs or 6 runs, you can afford to sit DeGrom or whoever it may be. I know Taijuan Walker is another guy where, hasn't really pitched that much in his career because of injuries in the 60-game season. So if you're scoring a lot of runs, that really helps your starting pitching and then your bullpen for that matter too. So I think the bench mob has been great. It's been really fun to watch, but there was always going to have to be that changing of the guard to your star players playing like star players. And honestly, I think it's very possible that it could happen because McNeil, Conforto, these are really solid hitters. They're professional hitters. They get runs in, and I think they're going to do that when they come back.
Well, guys, on the question of what do you do with the replacements, if you will, when the supposed starters come back, I think it needs to be, like we're basically saying here, a case-by-case basis. Because I look at a guy like Jonathan VR, and I can't believe I'm the only person saying this, but you give VR another week the way he's been playing defensively and continues to produce offensively, I think you got to start talking about him of like, if there's any Mets position players who should be considered for the All-Star game, I think it's Jonathan VR. I really, really do. I truly do. Obviously the Mets are going to have like 4 pitchers in the All-Star game, which is going to be good for them. But if there's any position player who deserves that spot, I think it's VR. But I'm the only one I've seen say it, so I guess that makes it a crazy opinion. But he's
been great. I don't think he's an all-star though.
No,
I love VR, but
I don't think the numbers are there. But like, I think what he means to this Mets team, then yeah, he's an all-star. If that makes sense, like he's just been very valuable.
He's been their best. He's been their best position player acquisition this offseason so
certainly.
far.
But here's the thing. What I really mean by saying that with VR is he's definitely the top utility player on this team.
I agree.
So in a time when JD Davis comes back, for example, and who knows when that's going to be. We really haven't heard that much from him in like maybe 3 weeks now. But the point being, if JD Davis ever comes back, I think at the beginning that needs to be a bit of a platoon situation, and then. I guess eventually, if, let's say JD Davis wins back that position somehow, which he's going to have to fight to win that back. That's been VR's position. And, from that point, VR, I guess, heads to the bench, but he becomes the top utility player on this team. He is as dynamic of a utility player as you're going to find all over baseball. He
plays all over the infield.
Play all over the infield. You could probably place him in left field or right field if you needed him.
He may play a little center, actually. To be honest with you,
he's quick. He's like deceivingly fast. Like you don't think it, but he's a very quick ball.
Well, he's an odd guy because he doesn't have the build for it, but he's a speedy leadoff switch hitting third baseman. Yeah. It's a strange setup for a player. It's something you'd set up on MLB The Show. It's never happened in real life. It just doesn't. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But power to him for that. But in terms of guys like, I love Jose Peraza, but he's been fine. He has not been anything spectacular. So at the point where McNeil comes back, that's McNeil's position.
Yeah.
I send him right back there. Conforto is a guy who's bat on a normal day you want in the lineup. So I'd say he gets that position as well. So I guess the only one where you really have to think about it is VR. But at the end of the day, you want the guys who are there to start. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think you mentioned like platooning guys, getting them both reps, kind of easing guys back in. I could see the Mets doing that with multiple positions just to get these starters back, get their feet under them, start to play better while keeping up this first place team, because the team is in first place and obviously you want to keep winning. So that's the bottom line. But I agree with you, guys like Conforto, even Nimmo, I think Pilar's been really good for this team. But I think to be honest, Nimmo is your everyday center fielder. To be honest, maybe
Nimmo against lefties does scare me though. I will say, he's never been consistently over his career. He's never been able to hit lefties. But I think Pilar has been a good center fielder, and I'm fine with platooning them. And that's
you can throw Pilar in left too. If you don't want Dom Smith out there, there's certain scenarios where Pilar will get his at bats. I think, and he'll get his chances because he's proved to this team to be just a leader too, both on and off the field. I think people really rallied around, when he got hit in the nose, and everybody really, he's got a great attitude for this team. I think just like fully embodies this Mets team this year. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to look at to see what Rojas does going forward. But I think for sure those starters, it'll be great to have him back. McNeil's a big one because he'll be back soon. So that's certainly huge. But shifting over before we go to break here to the other team in New York, and I know it pains Yankees fans to hear the New York Yankees being called the other team in New York.
The Steve Cohen effect.
Right now they are. Right now they are. I mean, the Mets are in first place, and the Yankees are a couple games above 500. So, shifting over to the New York Yankees. So I mentioned that at the top of the show. They've been underperforming for most of the year. Consistency's been an issue. At times, start of the year, the pitching was great. That kind of returned to normal. The hitting has seen really good bright spots and then has kind of struggled at times, for sure. And, early in the year, and I think still right now, the game of baseball, and I know New York media has just looked at the Yankees lineup and really scratched your head because it's a good lineup. It should produce at a high level. They should be hitting better than they are, and they're really not. So it's kind of confusing. A question I asked Justin was just kind of Justin Shackil, of course, our interview later, why this was happening. But Dylan, I'm going to ask you the same question here. What's your thoughts on the Yankees right now? Do you think this offense has a chance to kind of break out of the slump that seemingly is embodied the whole half of the season so far?
Well, it's an interesting question that you would think has a more obvious answer because of course you could be like, well, of course they have the opportunity to bounce out of it. I mean, look at the names in this lineup. You got Aaron Judge, you got Giancarlo Stanton, you got DJ LeMahieu. These are guys that, of course, and it goes without saying that they came to New York to hit the ball. As good as DJ LeMahieu is defensively, that's not why the Yankees signed him. So what it comes down to is, of course, they can produce. But you look at the reasons why they are not, and I think a lot of people would say this is it might be too presumptuous to say, but I think the pressure that this Yankee team was under coming into this year has had some kind of effect on them. Like I think they felt they could come at it not lackadaisically, but in a more nonchalant way that really just does not define a championship team, does not define a competing team. You can't frown your way into the playoffs. Does that make sense? So if I'm the Yankees, that's what I'm thinking is like there's no fire here. There's nothing there. There's nothing to invigorate them, and which is interesting because there are some personalities on this team. So I don't understand what's happening, and that's why I'm going to go. I don't know what's going to happen.
Before you say something, Andrew, I just want to with the fire on the team. I totally agree. Like. This might not have totally to do with the team, but more with the fan base. Last night, Friday night, they went to full capacity, and there was, I think, 24,000 people there.
Oh boy!
Which is, Yankee
fans don't show up till October. We all know it.
Well, but
at least September.
Game at full capacity in over.
I'm telling you.
Year, it's like I don't know. I think that's a big sign of just where people's minds and hearts are at with this Yankee team right now, and it's reflected in the clubhouse too. They're just right. They lack that fire. Sorry, I just wanted to get that.
No, I think it's definitely a thing with Yankee fans expect their teams to be in October, 100%. And I know a lot of Yankee fans that don't start tuning in to all the games until September or when they already won the division. It's just, and that's the pedigree of the New York Yankees. And this team, if they feel it, they don't. I think that also falls on the manager you shouldn't expect, no team should expect you're, in the playoffs, especially with this current format where, you don't have as many spots, only have the 5 spots, which I actually like a lot. But again, I think this Yankees team, it comes down to, I think the offense, and it comes down to them not hitting home runs at the same rate that they did in years past. They're 9th in home runs right now. They're usually 1. And that's, look, a 9th is still good. That's top 10 in baseball, but not 1. And they still K a good amount. They're bottom 10 in strikeouts. They're 23rd in runs. And you're hoping that guys start hitting well. And, there's a few average guys that I think the Yankees, I think they will start hitting well. I think DJ LeMahieu is not going to be a 260 hitter when the guy was hitting 330, over the past few years. And, you could talk about some other guys as well. The names are in the lineup. It could be Urshela. It could be, that's the thing. They have everybody here. It's kind of just like these guys got to start hitting to the back of their baseball cards. I think they will. I think the Yankees probably will turn it around, but the division is, I don't know if this team wins the division. I don't think it does actually at this point. Maybe they sneak into a wild card. Maybe they start, I think they're still above water though. They're still 3 games over, which isn't awful. It just takes one 8-game winning streak, 10-game winning streak, whatever it is, which, anybody can go on to really get back into that race. I don't think they're out of it. Just right now, they seem like a 500 ball club, and they're not getting the clutch hits, not getting the clutch home runs, not getting the clutch strikeout enough. And that's kind of why I think, they've struggled.
Well, can I say real quick?
I
think this is just like this feels like what it was naturally going to happen with the Yankee franchise. Like there's a certain mentality of a very Steinbrennian, we're the Yankees and this is supposed to happen. And I think like when the team stops producing and there's nothing to carry your momentum, there's no momentum to be carried. Nothing's going to happen. Like if there's not something there, then you can't just expect that something's going to happen.
Andrew, you just mentioned the division. And I find that a really interesting conversation because going into the year, obviously it was the Yankees division to lose. That was what everyone thought. They were at the top of the division, no questions asked. And it's kind of the perfect storm with the Yankees not playing well offensively, not producing at the level they should, and the AL East kind of overperforming and playing better than everyone thought. You have the Rays who I think
don't lose baseball games.
They never in the regular season, no matter who they bring out there, they're going to win games. It's a miracle. I don't know how they do that, but and then even the Red Sox are overperforming a lot, I would say. And then the Blue Jays are kind of sticking around right near the Yankees, third, fourth position. But this AL East has been way better than people thought, which is why all season we've said, and earlier in the year we said, the Yankees will figure this out. The Yankees will get out of this. Eventually, we're going to see how good they are. Eventually, they're going to turn things around. I'm a lot less optimistic about that now just because of how good this division actually might stay to be. I think the Rays are going to be a good playoff team. I really don't see why they can't be. And then even the Red Sox, maybe they're not built to really sustain how good they are right now, but I think they could still make a wild card. I really think that's not out of the question. So this Yankees team, it's not a walk through the park for the division anymore. It certainly isn't, because I think the Rays are going to be there, even the Red Sox, and then, of course, the Blue Jays who are going to get even better. And, I mean, we talk about, this window is kind of closing where, these young stars on these younger contracts, these rookie contracts are ending here, which I think is very concerning, which I think calls to the deadline, and the Yankees really need to go out and get somebody. Maybe a starting pitcher, maybe both. Andrew, do you have an idea of a guy maybe that they could go out and get?
I think they need one of each. And see, like if I was, I'll give one player of each really quickly. And I think the hitter, I think you need a professional hitter. I think right now you would like a center fielder. I think Charlie Blackmon could be a guy that you add. I know he hasn't played, a ton I think he's obviously getting older center field. I don't know how much you want to play him in center field instead of the corner outfield. I think he could probably for a half a season get by. I mean, even Yoenis Cespedes, he played a half a season in center field with the Mets. So I think he could probably, give them quality at bats. Everyone talks about the Coors Field effect, but it's not like he's going to this, pitcher's ballpark of Yankee Stadium with the short porch and everything. So I don't think that'll be much of an issue. And I think he really would give this lineup just some nice depth, get some big hits. I think he could definitely, be a nice add. I don't think it would cost that much. And then pitcher, I'm going to go Jose Barrios from the Twins. I think he's a guy that probably going to cost a lot because definitely, you're going to have him for a few years just because he's under contract. But 3.5 ERA, 81 Ks, he's going to be able to come in there, give you quality innings, get you strikeouts, be that 2 to Cole. And if Kluber comes back, you're hoping he's there as well. And then, you're starting to believe, hopefully with the hitting getting better, you're starting to say, okay, this team could be good in October.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dylan. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but it's interesting because I hadn't thought much about Blackmon. I think specifically in terms of needing a center fielder, which is what people have been talking about for a while now with the Yankees. I think a lot of people have said the main name being thrown around is Ketel Marte, which is an understandable name. Is a great all-around player who could play there. But you know what? I actually think Blackmon might be the better choice now that I think about it, because the Yankees are fine defensively. They'll do just fine. What they need is another powerhouse, and one that's coming from a little more powerful of a team at this point. And to be honest, the Colorado Rockies have been better offensively this year than the Yankees have been. You know what?
That says a lot.
I said it. So you know what, Blackmon, I like that choice. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think that the Yankees definitely need to do something at the deadline. The urgency, the pressure Dylan mentioned earlier, it's really mounting here. I think, if the Yankees want to find themselves in the hunt for the division and in the playoffs, I think you need two pieces, to be honest. With the Kluber injury and the Severino injury, the starting pitching needs a boost for sure. And then you need a bat, especially with Aaron Hicks, who has been out for the season. So that's certainly a little concerning for Yankees fans, but something I guess to look forward to at the deadline. Hopefully, for them, the offense starts to turn things around and produce like they should. But I think we're going to take a quick break here. Keep the baseball talk going here on the other side of the break. Me and Dylan are going to sit down with Justin Shackil, Yankees reporter, all things Yankees baseball. Stick around. That interview is going to be right around the corner. You're listening to One on One on 90.7 FM.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I'm Sam Davis with Dylan Balsamo. A pleasure to be joined by Justin Shackil, reporter, digital host for the New York Yankees, and a WFUV Sports alum. Justin, thank you so much for being with us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So we're just going to jump right into this New York Yankees team. Obviously, a lot of excitement, a lot of interesting things going on with them right now. Struggling has been the theme of this Yankees team so far this season, at least, but things are starting to look up a little bit here. Obviously, a nice sweep of the Blue Jays, and then now they're in the midst of a big series with the Oakland A's. So what's been the key to the Yankees series sweep of the Blue Jays and their recent success here over the last couple of days?
I think the offense has certainly picked it up. I think they're performing the way that Aaron Boone and the Yankees front office and probably the players envisioned themselves performing at the outset of this season. So you saw more clutch hitting, maybe not so much with runners in scoring position, but really that's down league wide. So I don't know if that's something that you necessarily harp on so much, but they're making better contact. DJ LeMahieu is making better contact. He has, multi-hit games littered throughout that 8-game road trip that just passed. Giancarlo Stanton looks pretty good, obviously. Aaron Judge has always been there. So you have a collection of players that I'd be remiss to not mention Gary Sanchez's name. He's really come alive. But you just basically have a collection of hitters who weren't getting it done in April and May, and they've come alive here. Has it been the warm weather? Maybe, perhaps. Has it been the league dialing back on sticky substances, things like, as aggressive as spider tack? That could be, a part of it. I think it's a combination of things. It could be them just kind of settling in and trying to, shake off some of that pressure that was mounting because they weren't executing. Now they're executing. And at the same time, you're seeing the pitching kind of take a step back. So, if you take away the one loss record at this moment and you just look at what this team is doing at face value, I would say that they're where people would have expected them to be in spring training, meaning the offense is performing and the pitching looks a little spotty. Looks like it could use a bump in the arm here. So, it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep that up. I mean, I think the biggest lesson that we could see over the last 2 weeks or so is that this baseball season can change on a dime. I mean, a week ago or so, the Yankees were 8 or 9 games back. I mean, now they're 6. It's not like it can't be, made up there, but, the Rays look white hot. They've lost 3 in a row. They dropped the game in Seattle, of all places, on Thursday night. So I don't think this division's over. I don't think it's time to panic. I don't think the sky is falling. The Yankees have to keep doing the work, but I don't think it's a place where you need to hit a panic button.
Justin, you bring up a lot of interesting points here. And, obviously coming into the season, we all thought of this Yankee team was built upon its offense. And then through the first 2 months of the season, they really kind of proved the opposite. So, to kind of hit upon what you were mentioning here, how much of that can be attributed to, hitting being down all over the league? How much of that can be attributed to the way the Yankees built this team? How much of it is just, lack of execution with a team that really should be getting the job done?
I think it's a combination. Again, when you talk about, fundamentally kind of looking lost at times, whether it's the base running, defense at times, I think those are areas where they're slowly cleaning it up. But in terms of not being able to execute at the plate, some players not performing up to the level of their expectations. That's a part of it. I think the offense being down league wide, I think the common denominator there is the sophistication that's increased with the pitching. And obviously, there's some artificial aiding going on there. I think it's going to normalize, maybe not get back to where the league and where we think it could, but I think you're going to see it start to normalize a little bit more. Once that first article came out about the crackdown on pitching substances, I talked to a lot of people around the industry about that specific issue lately. And, when that first came out up until now, batting average around the league's probably gone up, roughly 10, 12 points. So it's not this miraculous turnaround, but it's improving. And, you see the Yankees improving with it. So there's kind of a parallel pattern running with that. I think it's a combination of things. And, sometimes it takes a while for things to click. This could be one of them. It was really tough to try and explain how so many good hitters with very nice track records could be in such a rut together. But here they are, mostly coming out of it together. So it's interesting to watch. I think it kind of personifies this crazy game that we all like. And I'm intrigued to see how long it could last, because up until this point, they just had a 5-3 road trip, but really up until this point, they didn't really play a complete series that impressed you. Even their sweep against the White Sox, which they had a few weeks ago at Yankee Stadium. Yeah, they pulled off the sweep, but there was something about it that was missing. This series in Buffalo, I think they were playing like the team they thought they could be at the outset of the season, the team that they're expecting of themselves. So this was more of a complete series in my eyes. And I think it's the first one for the Yankees this season. So is it a situation where they can build off of it, or are we going to see another 1 step forward, 2 step back type of homestand coming up here with the A's and the Royals?
Yeah, you just mentioned the 1 step forward, 2 step back. That's kind of my next question. What do you think the Yankees really need to do just be consistent, which is, I feel like, something that they've definitely struggled with all season. What do you think the key is kind of for that consistency going forward?
I think they need to hit. I think they need to perform the way we've seen them perform in the past. And again, it's not like they, had their talent sucked up by the Monstars here. Like they're good. They have talent. So and I go back to TJ LeMay, who just kind of jumps out at you because he is so good at what he does in terms of making quality contact. And that's what was his bugaboo for so long this season, not making quality contact. It's turning around. So I think, as long as this trends in the right direction, I think they're going to be okay offensively. I think they need more stability in the rotation. Jameson Taillon up until this point has probably not met his own expectations. He hasn't met the Yankees' expectations of himself, even though he is a guy coming back still from those 2 Tommy John surgeries. In my eyes, I try not to invest so much in players who are coming back from that Tommy John surgery. I think it takes roughly 15 starts or so for them to start feeling like themselves again. And for Jameson Taillon, he's around 12, 13 starts or so. So I'm interested to see once he gets past that threshold, what he's going to look like. But I think stability in the rotation, I think they're going to be on the hunt for a starting pitcher as the trade deadline nears. I think the center field position will be upgraded. At least, they're going to make every effort to try and upgrade it. I think they need an outfielder, if for any reason, to, make sure that they don't have tired legs with Brett Gardner, because he's valuable when used appropriately. But at, his age, late 30s, pushing 40 years old, I don't think he could be playing every day. So I think the two biggest pieces of this team that need to be addressed is the center field position and some type of stabilizer for the rotation.
Justin, something you mentioned earlier was that there is a lot of pressure on this Yankee team, considering, hopes were very high on them from even before spring training started this year. So a hunch I've had all year is that has been part of their struggle, has been trying to overcome that. In your eyes, is that something that's playing a factor to them? And if so, how do they erase that stigma that's around them now?
It's tough to say, especially in this climate where no one's really allowed around the players to really get a feel. And it's not something that, necessarily you ask them point blank, but, you read like anybody, you can read moods, you can see facial expressions, stuff like that. We're not privy to that right now in 2021. So that's kind of tough to answer. But I also think, they've been in high pressure situations before this exact group at, the highest points of the postseason. So I'm not so sure if they're pressing in that regard, but I also feel like, world-class athletes, it takes a lot more for them to, kind of fall into that hapless rut. And I'm even talking about teams like the Arizona Diamondbacks. They've surpassed a record for futility earlier this week with the most consecutive losses on the road. Bottom line is, those are world-class athletes. I don't think you ever get used to losing. I know Aaron Boone was asked that question in the last week or so, where they were maybe there was some type of consistent, and I'm butchering this question now, but basically, if the losing got to them so much where they were kind of used to it. And I agree with Aaron Boone. If you're a pro athlete, you never get used to losing. You're a competitor. So, like I said, even players on teams like the Arizona Diamondbacks, they don't get used to that. I don't think they're in danger of ever falling that way. I don't think they're feeling that type of pressure. It could be some other type of pressure where, they're digging themselves into a larger hole where they have to, take the time to dig themselves out to get back to a point where they're going to be in contention, versus just building momentum and distance between themselves and other teams that they compete with. And when you do that, you can't afford to rest players. Resting such a big element of sports these days. And, you hear about load management, and you see the way that they manage players like Giancarlo Stanton or Aaron Judge, who, has, definitely done a great job at keeping his body healthy this season. But, you see a lot of players when they're not in the lineup, you hear about fans getting frustrated. In my opinion, they've dug themselves a hole here, especially in the division, if they still have aspirations to win the AL East. You can't afford to rest players as much as you probably would have liked to before this slow start to the season. So I think those are some of the things that they have to overcome internally.
Here with Justin Shackil, Yankees reporter. This is one-on-one. Justin, you mentioned the trade deadline, and obviously that's a little bit of a ways away, but do you think Brian Cashman and this Yankees team are going to eagerly go out and get maybe a starting pitcher or an outfielder? And if they do you have any idea of who that may be that they decide to go out and get?
Starting pitching's tough to put a finger on, because you still don't really know which teams are punting on this season. And the obvious names, if you take a look at it right now, the obvious starting pitchers who could be on the trade market, a lot of them are hurt. So it's tough to identify those pitchers. But if you look at, in my opinion, like I said, I think they need a center fielder. The typical names that you've been hearing: Starling Marte, A Michael A. Taylor from Kansas City may be available at a more reasonable cost, a more reasonable ask there. Starling Marte, Ketel Marte, players like that. You want to reach for the stars. Maybe a Joey Gallo. I necessarily don't know if he's a fit there, but I think a lot of the names that you're hearing about. The interesting thing is, though, the Yankees obviously aren't the only ones that are looking for that type of help. There's been a Yankee tax near the trade deadline that I think is something that does exist. Teams, think they can pump up the asking price. And I feel this is an ironic part of it all. And this is what interests me about this trade deadline. The last couple of seasons, the Yankees were in a much better position than where they are right now. And Brian Cashman chose to hold on to these prospects, not give in to the hefty asking prices to kind of bolster his team when they were clear-cut contenders in the American League. This year, it's a little bit different. A lot of question marks around the makeup of the guys that you have right now because of what they've shown so far throughout the course of the season. Is now when you give up those prospects? Is now when you throw your chips in to make this team better? It's an interesting question that I'm sure the front office is asking themselves on a daily level when they're hearing the asking prices for some of the guys that we've heard on the trade block.
Justin, you mentioned the Yankees front office, and they've been in the news a little bit over the last couple of weeks over just speculation, and it's bound to happen whenever a good team is not playing the way that they should, of whether jobs and job security are at risk here. Specifically, Aaron Boone, perhaps in a more general sense, Brian Cashman. But in your eyes, let's say the end of this season comes and nothing comes to the Yankees. No World Series, no pennant, barely a division win, anything of that sort. What is the timeline of Aaron Boone's remainder of time with the Yankees, or even Brian Cashman?
I think it's tough to say. I think it's a question that Hal Steinbrenner has for himself, and you definitely have to wait and see how the rest of the season plays out, because we've seen a lot of Yankee teams in the past. 2005 they started slow. 2007 they started slow. It's happened during Brian Cashman's tenure. I don't know if there was as lofty expectations with those teams as there are here with the 2021 squad, but expectations are always high. Aaron Boone has his contract's out at the end of the year. It's going to be something to watch for sure. It's going to be a narrative as well. But I think as far as tight situations go, it's really imperative to be even keeled. And I think, in my opinion, Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone, from what they've shown, we don't see what goes on, when they're not in front of cameras or in the clubhouses, when they're behind closed doors. But from what we've seen going on, they're as even keeled as it gets. And I think that's the sensible approach. So it's a wait and see thing for sure, especially with more than half of the season to go still.
Yeah. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit just to the AL East as we see it. You mentioned it earlier as well. Obviously, going into the year, all the talk was on the Yankees and them being basically the favorites in this division. But a couple teams have been a little bit of a surprise. Obviously the Rays and the Red Sox, and then you have the Blue Jays there playing decently as well right now, hanging in there. Is this still the Yankees division to lose here? Do you really think that the Yankees are still the favorites in the AL East, or could it be the Rays, or I don't know, even some of these teams like the Blue Jays and the Red Sox hanging around? Do you think it's the Yankees division to lose still, I guess, is my question.
I mean, on this day right now in late, mid to late June, no, I don't think it's their division. I think the Rays have proven time and again over the last couple of seasons that, they have the ingredients to, come together and really battle through adversity. They'll lose the majority of their rotation that took them to the World Series last year and still go out there and perform. They're clicking, the right switches here. They're doing a great job. So, and you take a look at the run differential, something that I, keep an eye on for sure throughout this division. I mean, the Yankees have a -1 run differential. Baltimore is the only other team with, a negative run differential there. The Blue Jays, who are behind them, they have a, +43 run differential. everyone else is in the green as well. So I think that's a good indication of how teams are doing. I think it's a good indication of what their true identity is. There's certainly room for improvement. There's still enough time, but Bill Parcells always said it, you are what your record says you are. And, at this moment, the Yankees need to show a little bit more in order to make a serious run in the AL East. They're over 5 games back entering the weekend. Yeah, they've had a nice series in Buffalo where they swept Toronto, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So, unless they, from what we said before, taking a step forward and then taking 2 steps back, they haven't shown that they can kind of bust out of that malaise approach over the course of a month or so. I think that needs to happen in order for the opinion to change there about the AL East landscape.
Justin, you mentioned the Rays earlier, and it made me think about when you look at this Yankee team over the last, really since before Aaron Boone became the manager, there's been question of why they have not been able to execute. And you talk about the Rays and their ability to continue to be a competitive team even when losing players that we all thought were the things that made them competitive. It seems that like with a team like the Rays, it's more of an organizational structure thing that becomes their success, and players are put into that. So when you look at a team like the Yankees, who has had all the talent in the league and just is not able to execute over the last couple of years, it begins to feel like some kind of organizational issue that things aren't able to happen. Is there any validity to thinking that, or is someone like me just crazy for making that observation?
It's tough to put a finger on all that because the 2 organizations operate so differently. So when one's having success, and in this case it's the Rays, who let's call a spade, they don't operate with as large of a budget as the Yankees, and if they're getting results, naturally, as a business owner, you're gonna ask yourself, well, what the heck's going on here? So it's a tough thing to digest, I think, for people in the organization, fans as well. And I also think that part of that is baseball being what it is, in 2021, where you're well into the age of information. It's all about, not necessarily working harder or spending harder, but working smarter and spending smarter. And I just think that any team has the ability, never mind the financial resources, because it just doesn't play, yeah, obviously it's a tool there. You should use it to the best of your ability, but it's not the be all end all that it once was. So, that's designed to give teams like the Rays, organizations like Tampa Bay, a chance to be able to work smarter, to have that ability, the opportunity to work smarter. And they've done a great job with it. Whether it bothers the Yankees or so, yeah, look, I'm sure the losing and losing out and seeing a division rival go further, doesn't sit well with anybody. But at the same time, just because they're doing something and they're going about winning one specific way doesn't mean it's the only way. So it goes back both ways. And I think, over time, look, the Yankees haven't had a losing season in a while, since the early 90s. So they're definitely doing something right. And I think at the end of the year in October, a lot of it is a crapshoot. I hate when I used to hear that and I really didn't like it. I thought it was just, something of an excuse, but I really start to believe it over time because, you really, to quote a famous radio announcer, you really cannot predict this game.
This is one-on-one Justin Shackil. One more question here before we get out of here. The Yankees have returned to full capacity here at Yankee Stadium starting over this weekend series with the Oakland A's. Do you think that could be any sort of boost to this team, or are you personally, or is the team excited for a move like this as they get to full capacity here?
Absolutely. I think what you see on television, especially in 2020, empty stands, cardboard cutouts, all that stuff. And then, you go around the league, there's energy, man. I mean, you don't want to play in an empty building. And I think, when you have a building like Yankee Stadium, where we've heard, we've heard it at its loudest, at its peak. The players in that dugout this season have been in that dugout when it's been at its peak, when it's been at its loudest. So when you have the potential for that, I really do think it's something that a team can feed off of. I think there's massive energy there. I also think if you're an opponent and the Yankees go on the road or wherever it is, the booing helps as well. It's just something that's a little bit extra, and I think you see it on television as well. I think the overall TV product is enhanced by a full stadium, a full building. When you have cutouts, you were doing something with nothing. It was nice to see that, nice to see that effort. But I really believe that there's a certain energy that's provided to a team when you have screaming fans there and a really loud building in your favor.
Yankees reporter and digital host Justin Shackil. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. It was our pleasure.
Thanks guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
We will be right back on One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Stick around.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. This is One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
Hey there! Welcome back here on One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, 90.7 WFUV, WFUV.org, WFUVsports.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. I think that's everything. But the point is, we welcome you back here. Hi, I'm Dylan Balsamo, your regularly scheduled host, Sam Davis. Andrew Galata will be back in just a second. But first, we're going to get to a segment in this show that is sweeping the nation. And it's called Headlines. It's a little thing we like to do. We're going to run you through some of the big headlines in sports right now and just get right down to it. And we will start with Kemba Walker, the 16th pick for the Boston Celtics in last year's draft. He has officially been traded to Oklahoma City along with a 2025 second-round pick. The Celtics, in exchange, will get Al Horford. That's a familiar name. Moses Brown, and a 2023 second-rounder. So that's what's going on with that trade. We'll bring back in Sam Davis and Andrew Galata now. And Sam, I'll start with you. I want your thoughts on this because this is an interesting situation when you consider how quickly Kemba Walker's stock has plummeted in recent times. So what is the thinking behind this for the Celtics? Is this the right move for them? Is this the right move for the Thunder? What are your thoughts on this?
So initially, I was a little confused, like you said. I mean, Kemba Walker's a big name. Obviously, his stock has definitely gone down. Injuries have hurt that. But the more I've looked into it, the more it's made sense, I'd say, from both sides of it. I think for the Thunder, it's a great move. They get obviously a guy like Kemba Walker. We know what he can be. You know the player he can be if he's healthy. And then also some big draft picks, which they're just really accumulating more and more draft picks, which really helps this franchise. That's any team that's rebuilding, any franchise that's working towards something bigger down the road. Draft picks are essential to that. So the getting some draft picks there helps them. For from the Celtics standpoint, it really comes down to more like of a money situation for them. They're dumping a pretty big Kemba Walker contract, picking up Al Horford, a guy who, like you said, Dylan, familiar face for the Celtics. He's played with them before. He really liked his time in Boston. I think he's happy to be back. And it's a lot less money than what you would be paying for a guy like Kemba. So I think that's the big thing. That was the motivation for the Celtics, dumping some money. I thought it was interesting when the trade happened. A trade happening right now is pretty unique with the playoffs still going on. Not really full off season yet, but we've seen other offseason moves now as well. So, but for both sides, I kind of get it. I think it's interesting that they made this move this early. I think it shows that Brad Stevens in his new role is kind of really going out and trying to improve this team, trying to make this team better. Not just looking for a new head coach to fill his role, but he's also looking to improve the team, or at least, figure out the financials to try and get this team back on track, because it was a certainly a disappointing year, I would say, for Celtics fans and for this organization. But I do understand the move from both sides, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great trade for OKC, I think.
Yeah.
Because, you look at it, I mean, it's really, if Walker's great, that's amazing for them. Their rebuild, hopefully at that point, he's like the center of your rebuild and it gets accelerated, and, hopefully then you're competitive, and that's amazing. And it makes sense why you're paying him the money, and, it works out. And if it doesn't, let's say he keeps on getting injured, same thing happens, what he did with the Celtics, you're in a rebuild. At the end of the day, you're not going to spend that money anyways. It's not that big of a loss if he doesn't bounce back and, kind of return to where he was at Charlotte. So I love the move on Oklahoma City, and you get draft picks. So basically you're taking on salary, getting a draft pick.
First rounder too.
Yeah. It's really, a win for them any way you look at it. So that's big for them. The Celtics and Brad Stevens, he's just trying to build the team he wants to, and you need salary cap for that. And, with Walker, that was kind of the area that they can, get that in. So again, it's not a bad move for them. We'll see what they do in response. That's kind of that, big thing. It was kind of the same thing when the Knicks traded Porzingis, obviously to fill up to, basically make a max contract available. I was like, well, it depends what they do after with that money. I mean, and, you could talk about that trade a while, but I think it really matters what they do now. And, as Brad Stevens tries to build his team, I don't blame him for trying to do that. And it's just going to be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, yes, it's a first round pick, but it's not like so I think the 16th pick, it's not like, the top 10 pick or anything. So again, I feel like right now, I mean, looking at that trade, great for OKC, and could really be a big win for them. And look, for Brad Stevens and the Celtics trying to build his team, I can't blame him for trying to do that, and for Kemba Walker, I mean, a guy played at UConn. I do hope that he, returns to that form, because he was really a rising star, came off, I think, 25 points in that last season with the Hornets, goes to the Celtics, and really it was injuries that, hurt him. So for him, I'd really like if he can get back to something of that, that last year of, with the Hornets.
Yeah. I can't blame Brad Stevens either for the way he's going about this. And I agree with you guys completely. It is odd. It's about a week or so before you would expect moves to happen. It's usually sometime during the conference finals when off season for the rest of the league starts. But why not try and start a little bit earlier? It's, if you need to make a big change, which I would argue the Celtics really needed to, and make some kind of splash, do it as early as possible. Set the tone of the off season. That's what the Celtics are trying to do here. And I would argue they're on their way to trying to do that. Now, does this fix everything for them? No, of course not. There's more work that needs to be done. And I also want to say, in terms of Kemba Walker, I hope he does not take this personally, because I think this has less to do with his performance as a player in his rookie season than it does a move that the Celtics needed to make. It's about cap space. It's about just the direction of the team. And you hope for a success with the Thunder as well. We'll see what happens there. But, there's for both of these teams, I think, and for all the players involved, there's a lot to be happy about.
You've seen guys in the past go to the Thunder. I'm talking about Chris Paul's another example of a guy that went there and then was able to really build and kind of rehabilitate, turn himself around, which was big. So maybe Kemba Walker will do that. Andrew mentioned a UConn, grad, obviously a huge part of that team. Yeah, exactly. And I think that seemed like a perfect fit for the Celtics, being, kind of like a lot of UConn fans are Celtics fans just because that part of Connecticut tends to lean that way. So for me, that it seemed like a really good fit to have Kemba in Boston. Obviously, it didn't work out, and I think injuries are a big part of that. But you got to hope that he turns it around, and that's a big piece. But you're right. I don't think the Celtics are far from done here. I'm really interested to see what Brad Stevens does, because it was an interesting move to have him take over that role that he's in now as basically the GM. So for me, that's a little, I guess, interesting, because he was a head coach, and I think the Celtics definitely could have went another direction with that move, but they decided to stay in house, bring in Brad Stevens. I do like this move. I think it's really them deciding, like you said, Dylan, what the offseason is going to be for the Celtics organization. And I think they can really make some moves to improve that young core, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, those two guys. When you have two guys like that, you can be a competitive team that makes the playoffs year in and year out. I truly believe that. So you got to build around a guy like that. Maybe you add in another star. 3 stars now is like the norm in this league. So maybe you add in another star, and
that's what Kemba was supposed to be.
Business. Yeah. So I don't know. For me, I do like the move from both sides, just because I think it's a good start for this Celtics organization. I'm looking forward to see what they do for the rest of the offseason.
No, yeah, and like you talk about them adding, they have the core of those two guys. And then they their first attempt at it was getting Gordon Hayward and then Kemba and Kyrie as well. So that was kind of the first attempt. And now that didn't work. Now they're going to try to do it again, which, for the way Tatum and Brown were playing, that's to have 2 chances at that with these young players is really something else. So, they lucky in that respect, and we'll see who they add there, who they try to add. But yeah, I agree. They need another player, and they thought it was going to be Walker or Kyrie. It just didn't work out. We'll see if they could, add someone else. It's going to be interesting to see who they bring in. And I think this trade will be, you can't really judge it right now. I think you have to judge it at the end of the offseason, probably not then either. And then you're going to have to see, how it turns out in the season. It's just one of those trades where you're trying to dump cap to add somewhere else, which you can't fault the team for doing it. It's just, now what do you do with it? That's kind of where I'm coming from, and, in that respect.
Yeah. The Celtics have tried a lot of different things over the last, we'll say maybe 5, 6, 7 years. And, perhaps you might say that, their failures, they've been allowed to try so many different things because they are the Celtics as a franchise, and that gives them some kind of cushion. But, at the end of the day, they have tried different things. If putting Brad Stevens in a different position might do something, but, they will continue to try different things until they find a combination that works. They just really haven't found that yet. They've gotten close a couple times. And, it's funny enough to see someone like Al Horford come back into the picture. That just goes to show the yellow brick road type trail that the Celtics have been on over the last half decade. So it'll be very interesting to see how that turns out. But you know what? Sam mentioned Chris Paul, and that's what I want to get to next, because let's talk about Chris Paul here. Of course, this is his first year with the Suns. And of course, the Suns just advanced to the Western Conference Finals against the Clippers. But Chris Paul has now officially, as of yesterday, I believe it was, entered COVID protocols and is out indefinitely for this reason. So this brings up a couple things. First off, what does this do for the Suns' chances? I know Kawhi Leonard is also going to be out for a little while. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, what does that do for the Suns' chances in this Western Conference Finals? And also, it becomes an assessment of how the NBA has officially handled COVID as we come on the outside of this pandemic. So, Andrew, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think this is over the last, I guess, year and a half now, like a team's worst nightmare. And as a fan, it's your worst nightmare that, one of your best players or your best player, arguably your best player, you're in the playoffs, you're playing amazing, and then test positive or into COVID protocols. And that's the ultimate, deflate the sails or deflate the balloon, pull down the sails. Like that's, definitely not, where you, so I feel bad for the Suns and their fans. And as someone who, likes the Suns, that's definitely unfortunate. I do think this Suns team is very deep. They play really well as a team, which I love seeing. Just looking at their playoff statistics, they have 6 guys scoring in double figures. That's obviously really big for them. And that's something that they're going to need without Paul. We don't know how long that's going to be. We don't know if he's going to miss 1 game, no games, 2 games, no one, it's kind of just up in the air right now, with the protocol. So again, I feel like this Suns team, again, with Kawhi out, as you said, I think that's, if he doesn't play, that's going to help them, obviously. And, it'll be interesting. I think Devin Booker, I think he's that apex player, and he's going to score. And I think late in games, he's a guy, he's a guy I trust, I think now. I think in the playoffs or in the bubble last year when they were playing meaningful games, he just elevated, and you got to give him a ton of credit with that. I think, DeAndre Ayton's played solid. So again, I think this team for probably a few games will be all right. And I think that's probably all will be at the end of the day. And just the way they play put together, I think is going to help them. And honestly, I just feel like, especially with Kawhi out, if both guys are out, let's say Kawhi's out and let's say Chris Paul's out, I put my money on the Suns. I think they're the better team, and I think they're deeper. And I feel like guys like Terrence Mann probably won't step up in those series. I'd put my money on a guy like, Devin Booker or, DeAndre Ayton, Miles Bridges, Crowder as well. So between all those guys, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like the Suns, even though without Chris Paul, and hopefully it's not a long period of time, I think they're in a good position to, just keep the ship above water for at least until, the captain comes back.
That's a great point that you just brought up that I didn't think about either is, a lot of teams are going through this. I mean, we'll get into some of the injuries in a second here, but, unfortunately, the Suns aren't the only team going through a guy being out of the lineup. I guess, fortunately, if you could say that, it's not an injury. So, who knows how long that'll be. I heard that Chris Paul is vaccinated. At least I saw something that could, I don't know if that's true or not. Some guys don't really like to share that information. So I don't know if that's true or not, but if he is, maybe the time he's out is less than it would normally be. I'm not sure what the protocols are exactly for the NBA. So that's something to kind of speculate about going forward. It's funny when you hear, out for COVID protocols, it's like it's a shock nowadays just because of, how everyone or most people are vaccinated in the sport. So it's surprising to hear that and very concerning because obviously you want Chris Paul out in the court for the Suns, a team that, like you said, really exciting. I think they're in a really good position to head to the NBA Finals. Obviously, they're right there at the Western Conference Finals. But like you said, Andrew, if Kawhi continues to be hurt, I think the Suns are consistent enough to still be that favorite to make it back to the NBA Finals. But obviously, you want Chris Paul back. You would love to have him back to kind of complement Devin Booker and the rest of the offense. So I don't know. It's a tricky situation. And another good thing too is that the Suns have had a ton of time to rest. They've had a ton of time off, so maybe that'll help. If it's going to happen, at least it happened now before the series. I know the Clippers just won, so maybe that series will be starting relatively soon. But you did have a little bit of a buffer zone of time where Chris Paul can be isolated if he needs to be. So maybe that'll help as well to get Chris Paul back in maybe the middle of the series or something like that, or at least a couple games into it. So, but I feel a little bad just because the Suns team was really rolling, coming off a sweep, plenty of time off, in really good shape. This seems like their Western Conference to lose. This seems like they're the favorites, especially with the Clippers now beating the Jazz. So I feel a little bit bad for that situation, but I'm hopeful. I think that Chris Paul will be back relatively soon.
Absolutely, and you can still be flying high on the Phoenix Suns if you're a Suns fan or just as someone who wants to see them win. Like there's still plenty of chance for them. But to be honest, I feel worse for Chris Paul at this point. This kind of felt like a redemption song for him. You know what I mean? This was kind of this is a very nice way for him to ride off into the sunset. And
did you plan that? Be honest. Did you plan that?
I promise.
Okay.
I really promise it. I didn't think of it until just really going off the cuff here. But yeah, so here's the thing. That's difficult. And what's also strange about this is that all the information we've been given about the situation is that he has entered COVID protocol. Now, what they said is that he's going to be out indefinitely, but enter COVID protocol could mean anything. We also don't know if he's been vaccinated. So we don't know if he tested positive for COVID, if he was exposed to someone with COVID, maybe someone in his family has COVID. We really don't know.
And it's been days now. I mean, it's been days since it's been indefinite. I mean, I know indefinitely means who knows how long, but it's been days since that news came out. That's the confusing part too.
It's really strange. So who knows how long that's going to be? But it's really difficult to see this happen in the Western Conference Finals for a team that we would love to see win, for a guy who we're really rooting for. And unfortunately, just to wrap up this conversation here, it's an unfortunate thing for the NBA and a terrible way for them to end this really story, because no league has been affected by COVID more than the NBA. They were kind of the team that kind of introduced the nation to really what can happen with COVID during all the Rudy Gobert stuff in what feels like 25,000 years ago.
Yeah, it really
and now this with Chris Paul seems to be the unfortunate finale of the NBA's affair with coronavirus. So it is unfortunate, but that's the Suns. Let's talk about who their opponent is going to be in this series, and that is the Los Angeles Clippers. Last night they finished things up against the Utah Jazz in Game 6. They were down 22 points going into the second half. I know, Sam, both you and Andrew were talking before we started this broadcast about how you guys both went to bed when it was no question a Jazz win that was going to force Game 7. But the Clippers scored 81 points in the second half to overcome that deficit. And I don't know about you guys, but 81 points will usually help you overcome it.
That'll do it.
It's kind of shocking, but anyways, this is a Clipper team that people have been riding high on for. This is the second year of this thing now, and finally they're gonna get to the Western Conference Finals, and they got a shot at this. Now they're gonna be without Kawhi Leonard, but so let me ask you two questions. I'll ask you this first, Sam. One, what does this 81-point second half tell you about this team? And second, what are their odds against the Sun in the Western Conference Finals?
I'm really impressed with this team because I think the theme in the organization, at least for the Clippers, has been win now, and it's been that way for a couple of years. Since Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have been on the team, it's been about, NBA Finals. That's the goal. With two guys like that, that was the goal for this organization. Whether that we thought that in the media is a different story, but within the organization, that's what they thought. And it's almost ironic that without Kawhi Leonard, it seems like they're getting towards that goal. They're getting to the Western Conference Finals. They look like they're playing their best basketball in the playoffs that they've played in a while, in my opinion. I mean, Paul George is playing his best playoff basketball in forever. It's playoff P is kind of temporarily gone, it seems like, as he's starting to play a lot better. Terrence Mann, I mean, unbelievable. He's like the new Kawhi Leonard. No, not really. I can't even say that with a straight face. But I'm really impressed with this Clippers team. I mean, they've shown a lot. You can say what you want. Maybe the Jazz were not overrated because they won so many games in the regular season, but maybe not built for the playoffs, or maybe not as good as a lot of people thought they were. Who knows? But I don't want to say that because I don't want to take away from everything the Clippers have done. Everything that this team has done, overcoming that deficit is incredible. Even in the NBA where deficits seem to be easily overcome, I still give a ton of credit to this Clippers team for everything they've done. And then for your second question, that's where my optimism stops. I'm more confident in the Suns team. They're a lot more consistent. They're a lot deeper, in my opinion. Like you said earlier, Andrew, even without Chris Paul, they can kind of survive that a little bit better. They still have a guy like Devin Booker who can take over a game. DeAndre Ayton is another guy too. And they've got plenty of guys, whether it be off the bench or other starters that are more role players, that I think really make this Suns team very deep and makes that very difficult come playoff time to overcome. The Clippers team really has to rely on Paul George, Terrence Mann right now. Maybe if Kawhi Leonard can get back on the court, then all of a sudden, okay, maybe things start to turn around to this Clippers team. But right now, it's hard for me to look past the Suns, even without Chris Paul. I think they got to be the favorites for me to get to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean, for the Clippers, I mean, Sam, you're talking about how they were win now for 2 years. I mean, they were win now since they acquired Chris Paul, 8 years ago, however long it feels like it's been forever. And they've been to a finals. I don't even know how many Western Conference finals they've been to be quite honest with you. I mean, I don't know if they've been to one or maybe two, but it wasn't a lot. And they've never been able to really, break that barrier. And for them to do it now with, I mean, again, in this fashion over the last two games with no Kawhi Leonard, I mean, you got hats off to that team. Hats off to Ty Lue, who I don't think gets a lot of credit, and he probably should. I know coaching the NBA may not mean the most thing, but I think, when you have a guy like Kawhi out, it would have been really easy for the Clippers to say, mail it in, We don't have our best player, and they didn't. And every night for this team over the last few, even when Kawhi was in the game, they have a new guy step up, whether it be Marcus Morris, Reggie Jackson, now Terrence Mann. And, they deserve a lot of credit to, get to even this point. And, as much as I feel like they're a star-driven team, and I even said this on a past show, like this will show you if only stars can win you. And that's not the case with this team. This team is more than just the 2 stars that they have. And you give a lot to Paul George as well, because, he's kind of assuming that number 1 option. He's been, pretty solid in it. So again, I think the Clippers, will they beat the Suns? I don't think so. I think the Suns are the better team. I think, when you look at, these 2 teams, I think they're definitely, with Kawhi, I think, he's such a good player. I think they may have the upper edge, but if he's not going to play, I really do think the Suns, do, even if CP3 isn't there, or if he is there for sure. But I think the Suns do have that edge. But, just this whole series in general, it's a breath of fresh air for 2 teams that, obviously LA, that market, but the Clippers side, really, we don't see a lot of it. And then Phoenix, that's a completely, new market. They haven't been good since, Steve Nash was, ditching it to Amari Stoudemire. So, I feel like that's great to see. So again, I'm excited for the series because it just feels like a breath of fresh air with two franchises that don't, have a ton of success always. And it's just, I think it's great to see that instead of, Lakers versus the Warriors or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. That was the kind of game where, you look at this Clippers team and you go, wow, they really do have something. People were right that they do have something. It's just unfortunate that they have not been able to turn in anything, and looks like they're not going to be able to this year either. Yeah. They got the talent, and I don't know what has been going wrong the last year or 2, but it just hasn't clicked. And unfortunately, I agree with you guys. I think the Phoenix Suns are the better team and are going to represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals. Shout out to Charles Barkley and his Phoenix Suns. But that's just how things are here. But there's a couple more things we want to get to here. First off, you take a look at the Eastern Conference. Obviously, there's still 2 series going on there. There's or at least there's not actually 2 series going on. There's Bucks Nets, which we definitely know what happened in that game. But more importantly, you also
can't tell Dylan is winking. Just wanted to.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot we're on the radio. Silly me.
Just, if you can't tell, because that's why we're all out. Sorry.
If you're driving at 12:38 in the morning and just wondered why there was a silence, it was because I winked at the camera.
Yeah.
But let's also talk about this other series in the Eastern Conference that will decide the other team in the Eastern Conference Finals, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers and the Atlanta Hawks. Hawks are up 3 games to 2 coming into yesterday. Philly forced a game 7 with a 104-94 win. That'll be in, at this point, as you hear this, just a couple hours from now. Tobias Harris, Seth Curry for the Sixers both had 24 points. Joel Embiid, 22 points himself and 13 rebounds. So, it's interesting because, Andrew, we'll start with you here. I think there were a lot of people who the Hawks were not on their radar until they had an excellent series against the Knicks. Who do you like in this game 7?
I think that this is the Sixers game to lose. I think the Sixers are the better team. I think they're actually the much better team when looking at it. And the Hawks, credit to Trae Young. And I know Trae Young, as a Knicks fan, I don't like Trae Young. I mean, he's a guy that doesn't play the brand of basketball that I personally like, but he gets it done, and you got to respect that. And so what he's done with this Hawks team, and he's gotten, I think, exponentially better, over, even this last year. And he's kind of assuming that number 1 role. And that's for the Hawks and them trying to, going forward, that's huge for them. That's so big. But what the Sixers do with the amount of depth they have with Embiid, Tobias Harris, Seth Curry is out hitting threes, which it's good to see a Curry, in the playoffs balling yet again. You could talk about Ben Simmons and he hasn't played well, but, you're hoping this team just has a lot of depth in game 7. Anything could happen, but usually the better team wins. And I think the Sixers are the better team unless they just blow another lead yet again. I don't think it will happen. I mean, if they blow another one, that's 3 games where they blow a lead. I mean, that would be insane. But again, I think they'll get it done.
For me, I'm on, I guess off record, but in pre-production, and I did guarantee, maybe not guarantee, but I said the Hawks were going to win this series. So I'm not going to back out on that right now. I'm certainly not going to. For me, this might sound crazy, but I feel like a lot of times the villain wins, and the villain in New York right now is Trae Young and this Hawks team. And for me, the game 5 comeback, once I saw that, I'm thinking there's no way for me, there's no way the Sixers can come back from that. The fact that they did play well in Game 6 and win kind of disproves that theory a little bit. But sure, I do believe the Sixers are the better team. But this Hawks team is very hot right now. Trae Young, as much as lots of New York Knicks fans and honestly basketball fans in general aren't a huge fan of him. He's been playing really well.
I mean, you give him credit.
Yeah, he's been playing really well. He's been scoring a lot, really leading this team. Clint Capella and company as well. And they'll be on the road, which is another tricky test, Game 7. You're right, Andrew. A lot of times the better team wins, but I don't think so in this instance. I really think the Hawks are going to ride some of that momentum from Game 5. They've been riding momentum, I think, all playoff series long. I think, honestly, I don't think the Knicks were the favorite in that series, but it was very close. And I think
they were, actually, to be honest with you.
Okay, yeah. So, and I think going off that, I think everyone was shocked with how well the Hawks played and how good they were, to be honest. I mean, people were definitely shocked with that. And that's continued because I don't think people thought the Hawks would get to Game 7 against the Sixers. No one really thought that. The Sixers team was viewed as the team in the Eastern Conference, other than the Nets, of course. And that was viewed as that matchup. But with how well the Hawks have been playing, riding that momentum, a huge comeback already this series, for me, it's hard to pick against him for that reason. I think Trae Young is going to go off and have a really good Game 7. And I think they're going to find themselves matching up in the Eastern Conference Finals with a chance to go to the NBA Finals. But for me, it's hard for me to pick against a team that's hot, maybe a little bit of an underdog that's kind of riding momentum. For me, a lot of times, especially in a playoffs this year where it really feels like anybody's, finals to go out and win, especially with some of the Nets injuries. For me, it's like, it seems like the perfect year for a team like the Hawks, a younger team, a team that is, playing well at the right time to kind of catch fire and keep this thing going into the Eastern Conference Finals.
It's an understandable point. And Trae Young very much fell into that role of a playoff villain, and he has played it so nicely. The best playoff villain since.
I give him a lot of credit for that too, because not a lot of players would do it, and he I think in today's game to assume that role, I do give him a ton of credit to do that with the whole quieting the guarding crowd. Like it takes a certain player to do that, and I do give him a lot of credit. I want to say that
it's a knife in the chest, and it's just it's such good television. But here's the thing, I'm not counting out the Hawks in this Game 7, but that's going to be a lot they're going to have to shut down in the Sixers, just in terms of players and Harris and Curry and Joel Embiid. It might just be too much for them in a Game 7.
Trae Young's going to have to score 40 and go off in 15.
That's what he could do.
He could
do that.
Yeah, he absolutely can. But not to cut this off, but there's one more topic I want to hit, and Andrew, I'll start with you here. Is we've talked a lot about injuries here. Of course, with the Brooklyn Nets, it's been well documented all season. They haven't had their 3 stars all on the court at the same time for barely any of the season, and we're seeing it right now with James Harden and Kyrie Irving. And we talked about Kawhi Leonard missing Game 6 with a knee injury. Who knows what's going to happen in the next round for them? So, but again, Andrew, I'll start with you here. We talked about it a lot with baseball this year, just like the quick transition of a short season into trying to get back into normalcy is having a whiplash kind of effect. Do you see that happening in basketball right now? And how do players recover from this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's an effect. There has to be. In such a short, quick turnaround. I mean, and I feel like they tried to, with all the, the resting and that stuff, they definitely tried to prolong it, but maybe just at a certain point they couldn't. And maybe it was just inevitable that was going to happen. I mean, you just go down to all these teams. I mean, really every team that's left in the playoffs. I mean, basically Atlanta's the only team that is hasn't seen an injury, especially the Western Conference or a COVID thing in the case of the Suns. But I mean, between the Clippers and the Suns, and then, what the Nets are dealing with, obviously, I mean, I just feel like, all these stars going out, and it shows you need depth to win. And I think this is why you may see more shakeups, because I think depth means more than ever right now in this year, probably only this year in the NBA, where it may not just be the stars because they may not be out on the court, and may need more than that. And I think that's why a team like the Suns, or, you could talk about a lot of teams, that maybe that depth means a little more this year because stars may not be out on the court.
Yeah, that's why this playoffs is so interesting to me, because I just talked about it, and we talked about it how the normal teams aren't there. The teams that we've seen over the past, aren't really there. There are new teams in it this year. And there's also new players stepping up in big time spots, whether that be younger players or bench players or role players because of all these injuries, which is obviously unfortunate. You never really want to see that. And, on the injury front, I mean, I think it's definitely related for sure. I mean, it's tricky because I understood why the NBA chose to kind of rush the season that way, or rush the offseason, I should say. That way they can return to a normal year next year. Because the NBA was so affected by COVID, probably, like Dylan said, maybe one of the most affected, pausing for so long, having the bubble, and then they kind of forced their hand to have a short turnaround if they wanted to play somewhat of a normal season this year, and then fully normal going forward. So for me, like, I get it from the NBA standpoint, but I also get it from the player standpoint, who some of them, I think LeBron James tweeted about it. Some of them are frustrated with this, with what's been a theme all year long of guys really not getting the rest that they need, not being able to see their families for too long in the off season. And I think that wear and tear has really gotten to these NBA teams, these stars and these big time players, which is really unfortunate. And to kind of transition to, me and Dylan sat down with Scoopy Robinson coming up after the next break, but he also kind of mentioned and explained the wear and tear that these athletes can really go through, and just the grind that I don't think a lot of people realize that goes into an NBA season. Late night traveling, getting in, recovering, waking up, going to the court, shooting around, and then playing, and then getting on a plane and doing it all over again. It really is a grind during the season. It's a long season, and to not have that buffer of a couple months to see your family and relax is really tough on these players, I think. And I think some of that is showing here in the playoffs, unfortunately, for the NBA and unfortunately for fans of the game in general. But it's still sure to be a really good playoffs the rest of the way, as it already has been. But I think we're going to take a quick break here. We'll leave our NBA segment there. Thank you, Dylan, for the headlines. On the other side, like I mentioned, me and Dylan are going to talk with Brandon Scoopy Robinson, NBA analyst for Bally Sports. Great insight, great perspective, really fun conversation with him. So definitely stick around for that interview on the other side of this break. Stay with us. This is One on One, 90.7 FM.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Sam Davis with Dylan Balsamo. Pleased to be joined by Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, new NBA analyst at Bally Sports. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time today to be with us.
Gentlemen, thank you. I couldn't think of any place else that I would be today. So thank you for gracing me with your presence.
That's so kind of you. Very, very appreciative. So looking at the NBA playoff landscape in general here, you mentioned the Hawks as a team that a lot of people were surprised with. Is there a team for you that surprised you either as an early exit or a team that's kind of still fighting, still playing right now past their expectations?
I mean, the Lakers are definitely a team that does that, but you know why? Obviously, with injuries throughout the course of the very short NBA season, or at least short recovery time, because they were 72 games played. And I think if the Lakers were healthy, we'd be talking them defending their ground. So you have that. To be honest with you, I am elated, but also surprised. I don't know if more elated than surprised, or more surprised than elated that the Clippers did the damage that they did against the Utah Jazz the other night. But I think you really shouldn't be surprised because they had the personnel on the floor, as I talked about that experiment, the two-year experiment. In year two for the Clippers, they're doing what they're supposed to do. I'm more surprised that, people can't figure out whether or not Kawhi tore his ACL or it's a sprain or whatever it is. But, and that's in the case of Kawhi Leonard. But I'll say this, one thing that gets lost in translation, particularly for Paul George in the last game, was that he had 16 rebounds, and 13 of those rebounds were defensive rebounds. He also recorded 2 steals, also had a block, and it was the supporting cast. Terrence Mann came up big in the starting lineup. Everybody pays attention to the dunk that he had on the Eiffel Tower. That is Rudy Gobert. They said it takes 15 minutes to get up all the way to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Homeboy got up on top of the NBA Eiffel Tower in about 2.5 seconds, and he finished with 13 points in that game. But I'll say this, it's the combination of, in order for the Clippers to finish what my late grandmother always said when it comes to relationships, you got to finish. She's from the South. Finish what you started. And, when you look at this series, okay, you took care of business then, but don't be that guy to just not to get your people's hopes up. Don't shake up the soda and then expect it to just be a small fizzle. Nah, man, that's going to explode. So you got to finish what you started. And, the combination of Marcus Morris Sr., the combination of Patrick Beverley, the combination of Bobby Schmurder's twin, Reggie Jackson, has to kind of come alive. And, Reggie Jackson came up big and did what he needed to do.
Scoopy, I want to ask you another question just about the landscape of the NBA playoffs right now. Obviously this was the first season, and who knows, maybe the last of this play-in tournament that started these playoffs, if you will. And it seemed to me that was in a real effort to get more teams that were, lower in the totem pole of the standings, to get them involved in the playoffs and maybe see someone make a deep, surprising run. And now here we are, coming into the second round. The only team that was not a top 4 seed is the Atlanta Hawks. It's all been the top seeds to this point. So first off, how did you feel about the play-in tournament? Let's get that first. And then also, how do you feel about the NBA's efforts to try and expand these playoffs and their execution of doing so in this season?
I was trying to fit a Bobby Schmurder reference in there and say something like it was all good about a year ago before there was a play-in tournament. But I'll say that, I wasn't a fan of the play-in tournament at first, particularly because it was introduced to us in the bubble. And, when we saw it, you saw in the end, it was really the Memphis Grizzlies and the Portland Trailblazers going toe-to-toe. And when you look at that last season, and how it got to that point was the Blazers were struggling at the beginning of the season. They brought in Carmelo Anthony, and it took some time for them to kind of get him into the groove. And, you had Damian Lillard, who was hurt. You had CJ McCollum during stretches that was hurt. And then about a year later, Terry Stotts was let go as head coach. So when you look at that situation, I thought Memphis was more deserving and shouldn't have had to really compete because they were consistent. Like, as much as people talk about Zion Williamson, like RJ Barrett and John Morant made it to the playoffs, or at least the bubble before Zion Williamson did. And, that's why you see coaching changes in real time in New Orleans. But specifically to your question, this year's play-in tournament impressed me more because the Warriors and the Lakers really felt like a deep playoff run. And I actually think that the Lakers ran out of gas by the time they were done with that play-in tournament just to be Steph. But, I think the one thing that I like about this year's playoff is that this reminds me, it's reminiscent of 2019, because in 2019, LeBron and Steph weren't in the, Steph was, but LeBron wasn't in the finals then. And, there is more out there than just LeBron. Like, I like LeBron. LeBron is actually is my favorite basketball player at this point. I enjoy watching him play, but I think there's going to come a point where LeBron is no longer in the NBA, where he's going to retire at some point, just based off of age. Nothing I've heard, but we better start getting used to that. So I just feel like it gives people a college basketball feel. I think that over the last 10 years, there were points where we just knew that it was going to end up being Golden State and Cleveland in the finals. And looking at the year 2021, where we are currently, like, we really don't know who's going to be in it. Like, people thought it was going to be Lakers, Nets. A great consolation prize would be Nets, Clippers. But surprisingly, if another team makes it, I don't think that there'll be so much far cry with that. Like, imagine a world where the Bucks, who many thought would go to the finals a couple years ago, actually did make it this year. Imagine a world where, the Utah Jazz avenged 97 and 98 when Jordan was their daddy, and potentially won, a trophy for the city of Salt Lake City. So, I think it's not a foregone conclusion that it's Clippers Nets, but I think that this play-in tournament gives people a chance to notice young stars that maybe folks didn't pay attention to, like the Ja Morants of the future, the Jamal Murrays of the future. And I think that the bubble helped usher that in as well, where we are currently.
This is one-on-one. Brandon Scoopy Robinson with us here, NBA analyst, Bally Sports. So looking at here, you mentioned Kawhi Leonard, of course, on the Clippers, obviously hurt right now. A lot of injuries. It's been kind of the theme so far, the playoffs between, we also mentioned James Harden, Chris Paul, in COVID protocols right now, obviously not injured, but, Kyrie Irving as well. There's been plenty of remarks around that being, this is a reason of the short turnaround from the bubble to the start of this current season, a very short off season as it was. Do you think that's the reason why we're seeing so many injuries here come playoff time?
It's possible. I'm no doctor, but what I'll tell you is, my NBA broadcasting / writing career began during the 97-98 season when I was 12 with the Nets when they were in New Jersey. And what I'll tell you is I remember I was around the first lockout back during the 99-2000 season. And I remember, even as a 12 or 13-year-old kid, 4 games or 5 games sometime in 7 nights, where you might start playing a road game. Say you're the Knicks. If you played a home game at Madison Square Garden on a Monday, you may end up in Portland by Sunday, which means in between there, you might have played a game. Like Monday, you might have played at the Garden. Tuesday, you could have played in Seattle. Wednesday, you could have been in LA. Thursday, maybe you had off. Friday, you're in San Antonio, Texas, and then Saturday and Sunday, you're anywhere between Seattle and Utah. And I feel like it's very similar now. And I've spoken to players that were playing during that era in the 90s and early 2000s that have said that, in conversations they've had with current players and just their observations, either in front office roles or, as analysts on television networks, it's reminiscent of that time. The difference is the NBA season then was maybe like 50 or 60 games versus now it's like 72 games, a lot more internet, a lot more regional coverage, and a lot more national games. And I think that when you look at this season, people don't take into account you play one night, you fly somewhere the next game, the air pressure in airplanes, the getting to the next city at midnight and then waking up at like 7, 8 o'clock to go to shoot around to be there by 10:30 to, you play a game later that night to media obligations. If a 7:30 Eastern time game is being played, you're done on the court by 10:30. You're not leaving the arena until almost midnight. And then you got to start that process over and over the next day on a day where sometimes maybe a team is playing one night, they can stay over that night and then leave in the afternoon the next day and go about their day. There's a lot of different things that were different this year that took place before the pandemic last year and even the season before that. And so I think just routine, you're used to a certain routine. You're used to not, getting your nose with swabs stuck in your nose every day to, a point where you were in Orlando for a long period of time and you didn't see your families. Like, it's just so much basketball and so much politics and the business of basketball that has happened since the bubble. And I think that this summer will be the first slight chance of normalcy that you'll have because the regular season starts in October. But I think routine has been the difference maker as to why so much injuries have happened. And I also think some guys are playing for their next contract, so they're going extra hard. I also do think personally that a lot of guys have lack of calcium in their diets. And I think sometimes that these sports drinks make your bones brittle. And I think sometimes certain players are more top heavy than they are bottom heavy, meaning their upper bodies are great. And then their legs are chicken legs. And I think that I think all that cutting and moving and the style of play is, fast break, neck speed basketball. And it's just a lot to compact in 72 games that began in December in the regular season and ended in April, May, and, it's just a lot. I don't want to ramble, but there's a lot going on at play.
This actually transitioned quite nicely into something I really wanted to ask you about that had nothing to do with what we were discussing earlier. I've found earlier, I was going through some of your stuff and I found you'd written for Respect Magazine, and you had done a lot of work regarding the connection between sports and entertainment and the creation of a celebrity and the idea of a celebrity and that relation that has to sports and the connection of entertainment, even politics in some way. I want to ask you, so how does an athlete become a celebrity, and also what role do we in the media play in creating that?
Well, to me, a celebrity is someone who's celebrated for what they do in their respective field. I think that it's funny you mentioned that. When I was in grad school at Hofstra University, I actually, my grad thesis project was actually on celebrity and the changing nature of sports journalism. And one of the people that I sat down with during that process was Sasha Vujacic, who at the time was dating Maria Sharapova, the tennis star. And Maria Sharapova blurs that line as a celebrity as well as an athlete because of her looks and because of tennis just being a lot more highbrow from my guesstimation. And I think that Sasha had the look because he was on a multi-championship winning Lakers team playing alongside the late Kobe Bryant. Lamar Odom, who was attached to a Kardashian. That's a whole different dichotomy. That's a horse of a different color, as my geometry teacher in high school would say. I think that when you look at the celebrity and the changing nature of sports journalism, I think that number one, you playing a sport makes you a celebrity. Who you're attached to makes you a celebrity, but also social media, your following, and just the overall landscape of all that comes with being who you are, the fashion, the blogs picking you up for what you say and do and more makes you that. But I also think that guys like Zion Williamson and LaMelo Ball are for this next generation of ball player what Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James were for 2000s, the early 2000s. Like they carried that torch, because when you look at, LaMelo Ball and Zion Williamson specifically, I mean, their AAU games were standing room only. They had the following before they stepped foot either in a college classroom or overseas off the plane. And I feel like, LaMelo Ball picked up where Brandon Jennings was supposed to go when he came back from Italy and played in the NBA. LaMelo took it to the next level, whether it was sneaker endorsements, whether it was, winning the NBA's Rookie of the Year award, to, just all of his following that comes with him playing for the Hornets, where you got people overseas paying attention to just the Hornets because he played over there. And that goes back to the whole, notion that, even the Balls, some folks consider them the Kardashians of the NBA in that regard. I'm still kind of digesting that, because when you look at the Kardashians were famous for the sake of being famous, versus the Balls. They created a buzz, they created their own brand, they created a sneaker, their father's loud, but so did the Kardashians as it relates to creating their own brands. I think everybody's a brand. And when you look back at Michael Jordan, he set the distinction between his Jordan sneaker and the Jordan brand, where you hand selected the Derek Jeters, the Roy Jones Jr.'s, the Ray Allens, the Eddie Joneses, Vin Bakers, and I can go on and on. Zion Williamson is the next generation of that Jordan brand ambassador. So I think when you talk about brands, money, politics, and more, this is what you get in the year 2021. But I think when it comes to politics, I think where we are as a society, COVID, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and more. I think in the 90s, Michael Jordan and many other athletes, were kind of stifled or shied away from speaking about politics because they were making so much money, which was, a reverse from the Bill Russells, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, the Muhammad Alis, who were very socially conscious and making a lot less money. I think now companies and brands have had to accept that these athletes are going to speak up. And I think a lot of these athletes are unafraid. You look at Kyrie Irving, who, many people criticize, he's unafraid to be unapologetically him, pro-Black, and also pro-Islamic. I think there's a lot to dissect there, but I think that that's what today's athlete is.
With Brandon Robinson here, one-on-one, shifting to the front office with the Celtics, who have been active now, trading Kemba Walker to the Thunder. They got Al Horford, draft picks exchanged between them as well. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you like this trade from both the Thunder perspective and the Celtics perspective? What are you thinking about this trade?
I called Brad Stevens yesterday. Now I see why he didn't answer his phone.
He's busy.
What I'll say to you is, it seems to me that there are some salary dumps and some things and some moving parts that are going on. I think for the Pelicans to add Kemba Walker, I actually think if they keep him, I think it's a good move, specifically because they need some older leadership to a young team. They had that last season with Chris Paul. I think that to pair Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, again, if Kemba stays, with Kemba, I think it's a good move, particularly because New Orleans seems to be a rehabilitation place for stars to shine. And you saw what Chris Paul did in Oklahoma and what he did this year in Phoenix. And so, you look at Kemba's knee. Kemba's knee has been an issue since the beginning of this season. He really didn't want to be there. And I think that when you look at Al Horford got what he wanted when he signed with the 76ers and then he moved into Oklahoma. He fell in love with the Boston Celtics franchise. I'll tell you that, when Philadelphia signed Al Horford, it was as a way to cover the loss of Jimmy Butler in free agency to the Miami Heat. And, it didn't work out. They had to beg teams to take him, and Oklahoma was the best destination. And in moving him, they ultimately, in the Sixers, got Danny Green. So when you look at just Boston and what they're doing, it's great for the fans. I think that if Al Horford stays, he's a guy that did get along with, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and more. But it seems like Boston is number one, trying to retain Evan Fournier to a longer term deal. Good defender, but also they're not finished. There are some teams that are going to be looking to will and deal. And I think that when you look at the Boston Celtics, how many people thought that it was a foregone conclusion that Victor Oladipo could become a Celtic. They could be creating some cap space to bring in, the likes of a Damian Lillard, or there's just endless possibilities. The other thing is this: the fact that Brad Stevens is willing and dealing and getting his name out there as a front office guy, he is reestablishing faith with 29 other teams that the Celtics are players in the trading game, because a lot of teams did not trust Danny Ainge. And I still do think that Brad Stevens is advising, I still believe Danny Ainge is advising Brad Stevens. It's his first trade in that front office role. But it just gives a new look to the Celtics and what they're trying to accomplish.
I've got just another one kind of following up on that, I guess, staying in, I guess, off-season moves here for some of the teams as the playoffs are still going on, of course. But the Mavericks also, of course, with Donnie Nelson being gone and Rick Carlisle being gone, back-to-back days there kind of. And then my question with that is, first of all, what are you thinking about potential replacements for those kind of guys? And then also, does this kind of threaten Doncic and his supermax over the summer that he's expected to sign?
No, it won't affect his supermax. I think it makes him comfortable to sign it, actually. I spoke with Mark Cuban earlier this week on the phone, and he intimated to me that he and Luka are close as he and Dirk Nowitzki was when he played, and you saw that the Dallas Mavericks hired Dirk in a advisory role. And to specifically answer your question, $215 million, 4 or 5 years on that deal is something that, that the Mavericks and Luka will probably sign this summer. But they still need some work. More specifically, you look at Rick Carlisle and his relationship with Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr. was ultimately traded to the New York Knicks. I'd like to see that the Mavericks, in good faith, try to maybe bring him back. But also, they need a dominant point guard. They need and I'm saying not him specifically, but they need a Chris Paul type guard alongside Luka Doncic. And most perimeter guys, or most hybrid forwards like Luka, who can, when you look at hybrid forwards, you look at guys like LeBron James, you look at Ben Simmons, you look at Julius Randle, you look at Luka in that vein. They need a point guard in that system to kind of offset what they can do. And you saw it in Miami with LeBron in their second year together after they lost the championship in 2011 to the Dallas Mavericks. You saw that LeBron kind of shifted off the ball some and played a natural small forward position, which was out of his comfort zone at first, where he was ball dominant and played point guard for so many years. So I think as Luka gets more and more into his career and starts cementing things, you wonder if they're going to kind of bring, a point guard, a pure point guard in to kind of offset what he's doing. I look at the Dallas Mavericks and I look at Kristaps Porzingis personally. I feel like he'd be such a great fit with the Chicago Bulls. But I'll add, if you're looking for a dominant point guard, I feel as though Lonzo Ball fits that box, but you'd be spending about $20 million a year. That I know Mark Cuban has the money. If you pay the luxury tax to get that done, you might be onto something. But I think Lonzo Ball would check boxes with Dallas in that position, because he can play both guard spots, just like Drew Holiday has been able to do, and he can defend both the point guard and the two guard position for Dallas. So. I'll just say that I think that moving forward, Luka has to question the direction of the Mavs. Getting rid of Don Nelson signals that the Mavs are hearing him. And I think Michael Finley, if you keep it in-house and relationship-wise, would check boxes as far as front office. In the same way that I think, you look at the New York Knicks, Allen Houston checks boxes as far as just, being part of that Knicks culture and being brought in to kind of assist and just, being the next phase of young folks who will be in front office positions. So we'll see what happens. But I do like Michael Finley in that front office position with the Mavs.
NBA analyst at Bally Sports, Brandon Scoopy Robinson. Thank you so much for being with you today. I had a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Scoopy.
Guys, thank you for the opportunity to be myself.
Appreciate that. This is One-on-One. We will return after a short break. New York's longest running sports call-in show. Stick around.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Headlines. That's the next segment here on One-on-One on WFUV 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, WFUVsports.org, Facebook, YouTube, blah, 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 blah. It's me, Dylan Balsamo. Our hosts, Sam Davis and Andrew Galato, will rejoin me in just a second. It is currently 1:18 in the morning. What on earth are you doing up this late? But while you're up, let's do another segment of headlines, and we'll start with the really big thing in here is and here's the thing about the Major League Baseball substance situation. We've all talked about it a lot, and we would like to stop talking about it. So tonight is going to be the conversation to end all substance conversations. We will not talk about it again until somebody gets suspended for it. But let's go through the specifics of this thing, okay? So baseball I believe it was at the beginning of this week, announced their new substance rules. Pitchers will be ejected and will receive a 10-game paid suspension if they are caught using some kind of substance. No, that's a paid suspension. And also, there's a lot of people unhappy, one of them being Garrett Cole. And, you know, one of the reasons a lot of people are unhappy is that Major League Baseball has not really given any specificity as to what substances in general are banned. We know the one Spider Tack is the one everyone's been using, that we know that's not going to be allowed. But, you know, other than that, it's kind of up in the air. So I just want you guys' opinions in general about all of this, and we've had so much time to digest this situation. But Sam, I'll start with you here. Just sound off.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. You shouldn't have said that because I'm going to now. And this is this is going to be a lively discussion because I think we all have pretty strong opinions about this. But for me, I really liked what the MLB decided to do when I first heard of this, which I think was 2-3 weeks ago, where they first came out with a thought of doing this. And I really liked it because I saw a clear issue in the game of baseball. You saw pitchers dominating and hitters being terrible, to be honest. So for me, there was a clear issue that needed to be changed. And I really like that the MLB decided to change it now instead of waiting till the end of the season, because I don't know, I think speaking for baseball fans in general, people did not want to watch hitting be this bad and pitchers dominate this much. I think we wanted a little bit more balance to the game for sure. And that's what this rule was intended to bring. To the extent to which it helps hitters who have actually improved since the rules have been implemented. I don't know if it's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be, but it certainly plays into it. It certainly helps hitters a little bit, maybe gain some confidence at the plate in a game where pitchers were dominating. For me, the other thing is that I'm so out on pitchers complaining about this. I'm so out on it. Like, you're cheating. You're doing something wrong. And I know baseball is a game of cheating. And there's been cheating in baseball since baseball has been a thing, since baseball has existed. So I get that. I get people being a little frustrated that a situation like this is handled differently than, let's say, the Astros situation was handled, or previous cheating scandals have been handled, whatever. I get that, but stop complaining. You have rosin, which is a substance that is used by everyone. You have your sweat. Combine those two and you can get a good grip on the baseball. I'm almost 100% certain of it. You don't need sticky substances. You can pitch without it. It's not the reason you're getting hurt. And to be honest, if that is a reason, that's terrible. You shouldn't be relying on cheating that much. That means you're not a great pitcher, in my opinion. So for me, if you're a pitcher, stop complaining about it. Start pitching. They needed a way to kind of level the game out. This is helping a little bit. Pitchers were just getting too dominant for me. A pace of play argument could be brought up, which I think we're going to get into also, because checking guys throughout a game might take a little while, which could be a little bit of a concern. But they haven't really caught anyone yet. They haven't even. I haven't seen anyone being checked yet, at least since I've been watching baseball. So I don't know how much that's even happening. I think more of it was we're explaining that this rule is being implemented, so stop using the substances. I think a lot of pitchers were deterred from using it just with the rule being implemented. So for me, I really like it, and I'm sick of pitchers complaining about it, to be honest.
I mean, this is just, it reminds me of the Astros cheating scandal a lot, because yes, as you said, there's cheating in baseball that goes back to the beginning of the game. So let's bring up the sign stealing. Everyone, not everyone, but people stole signs, which I guess it's cheating, I guess, but they do it.
A lot of teams do it.
Yeah, which is like whatever. So that's not like stealing a sign from second base is different to what the Astros did, where they put cameras and like all that stuff, and whatever it came down to be, where they went above and beyond everybody else. It's also like, it's fine to use. First of all, rosin's the acceptable one that the MLB wants you to use, and like there's definitely understanding of using the grip, and even like the natural stuff with like the actual sunscreen with whatever. I guess if that helped, like that's probably towing the line, but like at least it's like sunscreen, and we all use sunscreen, and I'm assuming a lot of baseball players use sunscreen. And when I played baseball, I used sunscreen just because I don't want to get burnt, but it goes above, like now we're spider tack, whatever that's even used for, I don't know. But the way you can, like people were saying, like it's like ripping glue off of paper when you glue something to, that's what it would feel like every pitch. Or it would be like Trevor Bauer concocting his own substance to, so his RPMs are the highest. Like it's so like, it's really frustrating to when you have a guy like Cole and Bauer, where their RPMs and their spin rates get exponentially higher in such a short amount of time, where something's wrong. And that's the cheating aspect of it, where you can get so good, and it's not natural for that to happen. It's not like Jacob deGrom, he's so good, but it's not like his RPMs are like ungodly. It's other stuff, and it's natural stuff, which is why I love Jacob deGrom so much. And it's just different with Cole. And then he's, complaining, on the podium, like saying how it's so bad, like he got away with it forever. And, you had amazing seasons with it. He got away with it for 3 years, got to a World Series, won a Cy Young, made $300 million because of it. Yeah. And now it's going away, and he's not a bad pitcher, and he's not a bad pitcher. He's
still a good pitcher.
Exactly. Is he trying to be like stand up for other players that have it? It's so, I don't understand it. And coming from, if you're not a guy using this and you see a guy like Garrett Cole, like complain about it so much, or even a guy like, Tyler Glasnow, you're like, that must be so frustrating for those guys. And then the hitters that they just got cheated off of. I mean, if basically what happened for, however long this was going on for, like that's, I would be really upset if I was a player, right now I'm upset as a fan, but especially if I was a player who wasn't, cheating or doing this, I'd be like, this guy is complaining how he can't cheat anymore. It makes no sense.
Okay, look, I'm going to give an opinion that might be an unpopular opinion, but is how I feel. Not completely, but in a general sense. Are you ready for this?
I think so.
for the most part, I really don't care about cheating in baseball. I really, really don't. Like, it does not matter that much to me. And to be honest with you, it doesn't really seem like Major League Baseball cares that much either. We saw how they let the Astros off easy. They really did.
Mhm.
They got the commissioner to call the trophy a piece of metal. Like, it's all just so backwards to me, quite honestly. Look, I mean, you want to bring up offense? Fine, I'm all about that. But here's the thing. For one thing, as we've been mentioning a lot here, cheating has just become it's just a part of baseball. I mean, and when you think about it, like this whole sport sounds like the premise of a Marx Brothers movie. Like, really, and just it's a very old-timey type sport where it's like you stand at the plate and then you stand there and you wait for the ball and then you smack it.
But
Like,
it is an old-timey sport. I mean, it's been around forever.
It's an old-timey. It's been around forever. The way it's played is not really changed, and they've been throwing spitballs since 1924. Like, it is. I think it's just silly when people try and regulate it like that. Like, look, I get trying to bring up offense, but here's the big thing, and this is really what I care about. You mentioned pace of play, Sam. This is what it really comes down to. Baseball's biggest problem was never steroids. It was never sign stealing with the Astros. It's never been this stuff on the ball. It's never been the problem. The problem is Major League Baseball is losing fans and is at an alarming rate. It's people are falling out of love with baseball because baseball is refusing to change with the times. Baseball's trying to stay in that position of 1945 when they had the gripes of the whole country. It's just not how it is anymore. And this is what it comes down to. Nobody's been hitting this year, and these games are still way too long. There's no reason for a baseball game that's a 2-0 win to be 3 hours. That's ridiculous to me. That's the problem here. And if you're gonna spend all of this time that Major League Baseball is planning on doing, I don't think they've fully implemented this whole checking the ball as often as they plan on doing yet. If you're gonna be doing that as often, you're gonna add 10 minutes to the game. Major League Baseball has no idea how to fix the problem that is their games are too long. Because unfortunately, they do not want to address the fact that the actual problem is there's too many commercials. But that's a whole other conversation. Sam,
Yep.
I'm sure you have more to say, so keep talking.
No, yeah, I'm with you on that. The games are too long, but what do you do? I mean, you're right. Like, I think commercials is a big thing because I look at, let's say, youth baseball or maybe even college baseball, for example, like games that might not be on television. In between innings, it's a pretty short amount of time. If a pitcher's rolling, you throw 2-3 pitches, send it down. All right, we're good to go. Like, it should be a minute or two, really. I mean, and the first baseman rolling ground balls to the shortstop to pick it up and throw it to first. You don't need that. You're a big league ball player. You don't need a bunch of time in between the innings. That's where all those commercials come in. That's where I think really this game gets a little slower. Another thing I don't like is, and this is probably just a me personal thing, but I don't like how there's a lot of strikeouts and the balls aren't being put in play as much as they used to be. For me, that speeds up the game as well. If pitchers just throw strikes, balls are put in play, outs are made. For me, that's just general as a fan, it makes it a little more entertaining. But I don't know exactly how you change the pace of play situation unless you do something with shortening up how long these commercial breaks are. And they're not going to do that because that's how they make money. And unfortunately, they can't really get out of their own way and realize, hey, we're losing a lot of fans to maybe the NBA, for example, or the NFL is gaining more and more fans. So for me, I don't know. I think pace of play is definitely an issue, but I still like the move, the sticky substance. Going back to that, I still do like that move because I think there was a big time problem with hitters in this league really struggling. Something needed to change. I think it's definitely helped. Maybe they don't really need to enforce it that much because you're right. The MLB doesn't really care about cheating that much. At the end of the day, it's always been a part of their game. But I guess over the top, unnecessary cheating, like we're seeing with spider tack and other things like that, that's when maybe they start to care a little bit, or more than normal. So for me, like that, I do still like the sticky substance rule, but the pace of play thing, it's really, I hate to say this, but it's almost like a lost cause because they're not going to change the commercial breaks and how long those are. And I don't really see another clear way to really shorten this game up.
Yeah, so I have two reactions, and I'll get to my main point. First of all, Dylan, you said baseball stuck in 1945. Those games are also an hour 50, so obviously they weren't, stuck in 1945.
Yeah,
those games were so short.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
So,
it doesn't make any sense.
If you can't see, Dylan is emphatic right now. Hands are in the air.
I mean, the games were so short, and it could have been like 5-3, but the games were used for some reason. I mean, I guess commercials. I guess there weren't as any commercials. And Sam, to your point, you talked about like college. I was doing a game, Fordham game with Matt Mikulski pitching. It was a 7-inning game, and he's outstanding. And we all know how good he is. Exactly. Guess how long that game was? It was a 7-inning game because it was a doubleheader. But I think I know the game you're talking about. I want to say an hour and a half. It was less than an hour and a half. It was like an hour and 27 minutes.
Yeah.
He pitched, amazing. And
that's incredible.
But and that was 7 innings. So that game would have,
Jacob DeGrom, 9-inning start. There's no reason that can't be 2 hours flat.
Yeah. So that's something that I don't know why the games. I mean, I'm assuming because it was doubleheader, probably the game was everyone was trying to go a little quicker because doubleheader is long, but still, that's something that, you have that shorter game. I was like, wow. I was like, it was one of my first games, I did with baseball. It's like, oh, this is going to be nice and short.
An unrealistic
it was unrealistic. I mean, the next game was, I think, 3 hours. So that was the difference. It was a slugfest. But anyways, I digress. But that's obviously something that I think right now with pace of play is the thing is the issue is you don't want to cheapen the game either, which so I don't think making every game 7 innings is going to help that either. Maybe it does. I mean, I feel like as someone who watches, the Mets are going to play a ton of these. We're going to kind of see how I feel, but I feel like the Mets always win them. I don't know why, but that's just kind of how I
pitching, I
yeah,
guess.
It's always the pitching, I guess, shortening games, but I don't know if that's the best way. You don't want to cheapen the game either. Commercials, I mean, MLB, every sport, they're going to find the money. Playoffs will be longer. I don't know. It's an interesting scenario. Maybe you want to do more 7-inning games, but I think that would cheapen the game a little bit. I don't know. It's a very, it's a slippery slope, and the sticky substances. I think cheating, the last thing I want to say about it is just cheating in general. I think it's one thing to cheat with just stealing signs from second base. But when you're using, if you're concocting your own substances,
I don't even call that cheating. Like stealing, taking signs from second base. If you're looking at the catcher's signs and they're being that obviously stupid, that doesn't really happen in the pros too much.
Yeah, but I'm just,
if you find a way to pick that up,
it's just being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And even the sunscreen, if you're using, what was happening was I heard that they would fill sunscreen with a different substance and just, that looks like sunscreen, tastes like sunscreen, but it was not sunscreen. Yeah, and that's, I mean, if guys were doing Trevor Bauer has this pitching lab, who knows what he's concocting in there? I mean, and who knows how many other people that are not as upfront as Trevor Bauer are doing that as well. So I just feel like that stuff is over the top and that stuff has to be gone. And I don't know what, look, I've never pitched. I mean, when I was playing baseball, the only thing I could throw is a fastball. So I don't even know what it's
spin rate didn't matter as much.
Exactly. Didn't matter. So I don't know how much the rosin matters or the rosin, I think it helps for sure. But again, I mean, if guys are trying to have to concoct their own substance, maybe there's a problem with the way, if you want to be this amazing pitcher, look at your mechanics, look at something else, not trying to take the easy way out and just, cheapen it almost. Because that's what it felt like when your RPMs go up, the 5 times in one off season. That's not possible. And when it was happening, it's always oh, you're probably using something. And now it kind of boiled over to what we're seeing now.
Yeah, and before I say anything, let me just say I'm aware for those of you watching this that I have been a GIF machine during this entire segment. But so here's the thing about sticky substances and sign stealing and all these different things, and even steroids as well, where Major League Baseball often acts like they have an obligation to kids watching to have some kind of moral standard, as if kids have access to performance enhancing drugs and spider track and advanced.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
To me, it's just it's a whole bunch of hypocrisy, if you ask me. It's just first off, if you really care about putting on a good example for kids, cater the game to kids. They cater the game to older fans. And that's what this really comes down to. But I want to end this conversation once and for all. So I'm going to give you both one last chance to say one quick thing, whatever you want about the sticky substance situation, other S words, and just say what you want, and then we're done with it for now.
Well, you can say we're done with it, but something's going to happen soon, and it's going to come back again. But anyway, I can say I guess I can't really say I'm done with it, but my final point is I totally agree with you, Dylan. We're about appealing to younger fans because I love the game of baseball. I do. And I think all of us here do, to be honest. I mean, we all love the game of baseball. We are all going to watch no matter what. But I love the game of baseball so much. I want to see other people share in that feeling. I really do. And for me, shortening the game is key to getting more younger fans into the game, enjoying the game and watching it. And that's why I get upset, because I really want to see this game get better and get more popular, because I know the places it can go, and how good of a sport it can be, with more popularity and with more younger fans. So yeah, that's my last take on it.
No, yeah, I mean, I will say one more thing, and like you talk about the younger fans, also more national coverage and better national coverage will help 100%. And also, like, I don't think a single Jacob deGrom start has been on national TV this year.
Oh.
So that's something to point out. The best pitcher, literally the best pitcher in baseball history, or having the best season in baseball history, I should say. Who knows down the line, but this year he's having the best season in baseball history, and not one of his starts have been on ESPN or anything. And even if it was on ESPN, the coverage wouldn't, I don't think, be as good as what Gary, Keith, and Ron do on the Mets broadcast. And you got to showcase the game. And I know that they've been doing that in some ways with like Ohtani and some other guys, but to see DeGrom never, like DeGrom start not on national TV, that is a huge problem. Like, and that's something that also I think shares the blame as well. Like, you got to be able to market your stars, and the NBA does really well, but MLB, I mean, that's a huge issue.
It is certainly a huge issue. So we will put this substance issue to bed for now, for as long as we possibly can. And on that note, tune in to Nosebleeds this coming week, where we will inevitably talk about it again. But I want to move on here. I want to very quickly touch on some more baseball, not Major League Baseball. The College World Series starts as you watch this. The first day of games will have been completed between NC State and Stanford, and then Arizona and Vanderbilt. But I want to get you guys' thoughts on. I know you guys are both big college baseball guys, so give me your thoughts on who you like in this tournament, who might surprise people. What do you think? We'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is like, I mean, I don't know, like it's kind of like how I kind of am in the NFL too, but like just like I like college sports, so I like to see the prospects and that type of stuff and like how they project. I mean, baseball's a little farther down the line, but this Vandy pitching staff, I mean, how dominant they are with Rocker and Leiter, they're a joy to watch. And I mean, what Rocker did in that, it was 2019, I guess, feels like forever ago, but when he was just so lights out and he pitched and he was the MVP of the World Series and he played so well. And I want to see if he can repeat a performance like that. And same with Jack Leiter, who's, another guy who's going to be outstanding. We'll see where they go in the draft and that type of stuff. And to see those guys progress, not only through college, but to the pros eventually, it will be really fun. And now to have both of those pitchers on the same team is just, it's something else. And, you got to enjoy it while you can.
What I like about this College World Series is there's the regulars aren't really there. I guess Arkansas was the number one team in the nation. They got bounced early. Texas Tech, who's normally there. LSU, who's normally there. Some of the teams that have just been regulars. I mean, Vanderbilt has been a regular, and they're obviously still there, that number one team right now of the field. But a lot of new teams, Stanford, NC State, a couple teams that kind of were those Cinderella or upset picks to get to the College World Series that found themselves there. Which I think is really exciting. It leaves it open to just about anyone. I mean, Vanderbilt's definitely the favorite, but there are other teams in it that can certainly win it all. And a team like Mississippi State, I like to highlight them because they've been there before. Good team. And I think they're flying a little bit under the radar, but a team that could definitely make some noise. But I think I'm really happy that the College World Series, the regionals and super regionals, NCAA tournament, college baseball is getting a lot more press. A lot more people are talking about it down south, and watching those stadiums filled with people to watch, a big super regional game is really exciting, really cool, really fun to watch. So, and then the the energy that Omaha brings in the College World Series is also really cool for me. So I really like that more people are starting to pay attention and starting to watch college baseball and the NCAA tournament, because it is really exciting. It really is anybody's tournament this year. So I'm excited to really sit down and watch the games in Omaha. And it's a great atmosphere. So a lot of fun, a lot of exciting things up ahead for college baseball, I'd say.
Absolutely. Very exciting tournament we have ahead of us. And, what I like to see a lot in college baseball is offense. I think the College World Series is such a great place to watch who the next great offensive guys are. We know who the great pitchers are going to be. Those usually established by then. But, with teams like Arizona and Mississippi State, who have been so good offensively all season coming into this tournament, it's just going to be very exciting to watch guys like Jacob Berry and Tanner Allen. And these guys kind of really come into their own in a national spotlight, which is a big thing for an offensive player, it seems, in baseball. So I'm very excited to see that. But, we don't have a ton of time left here in this segment, but, we don't get many opportunities on this show to discuss golf. And I know both you, Sam, and Andrew, you guys are both big golf guys. So I want to talk about the U.S. Open for a little bit. It's going on right now. We're in round 3, I guess today is. Currently tied for first place with 5 under is Russell Henley, the American, and a Brit named Richard Bland. And tied for third is Matthew Wolff and Louis Oosthuizen, right?
Oosthuizen. Comes right off the tongue.
Right off the tongue. Yeah, it's easy. It's like an easy one. Are you kidding me? That's like Richard Bland. How do you mispronounce it?
It's like this. I hear no difference. Yeah, you said the same name twice. But tied for 5th place is John Rahm and Bubba Watson, both with 3 under. And then you look at Brooks Koepka and DeChambeau. They are both even and technically tied for 13th in that sense. But, guys, just give me your thoughts. Just go off. We'll start with you, Sam. Who are your favorites in this tournament? Who has surprised you so far? Who's disappointed you? Give me everything.
So me and Andrew talked about the course has definitely been playing tough the first couple days. Early looks at the 3rd round while we're recording this, and you'll see, I think numbers will be better today and going forward into Sunday as well. I think they'll improve and guys will start to shoot better. I love the Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau kind of rivalry. I think it's awesome for the game of golf. When these two guys are going at it, and they really actually don't like each other.
Yeah, they don't like each other.
They really don't like each other, which is awesome for golf because you don't really see that. I mean, since Tiger and Phil was the last, I think, big rivalry, and even them, they didn't hate each other.
They don't. Yeah, they like each other. I think
they were
the
friends,
best 2 golfers in the world.
They were just the best 2, and they were going at it. But this is different because you're right. They really don't like each other, and they're 2 really solid golfers, like you said, Dylan. Right now, tied at even under par. And the PGA Tour refuses to pair them together, but they might have to come Sunday if they have a better round 3 here. You might see them Sunday facing off against each other, which I think would be really awesome for the game of golf. I would love to see that. Obviously, DeChambeau won the U.S. Open, so he's the defending champion there. So I'd like to see that. Bubba Watson is also cool to see him in the hunt. I like that as well. For me, there's just there's nothing better than watching the U.S. Open. It means that summer is really here, at least for me, because golf just fits really nicely with summer and putting it on. So I'm really excited to watch the last round or so. But I really want to see Brooks and DeChambeau go at it. I think that would be really fun. It's bound to happen eventually. I think they're 2 really good golfers, and there's bound to be a moment where they're going to be facing off against each other in the future for sure. Maybe it's this weekend. We'll see.
Yeah, so I just want to start off. There's usually 4 weekends we could talk about golf here on this show. Yeah. And this may be the only time that I'm on this show. So I had to break out this golfer's excuse mug. It's every morning I drink coffee from it. Where is my thing?
Oh, I see it.
So
you got to read some of those off. Those are tremendous.
Yeah. So you got caddy got lost, too many divots, too much hip action, which is always, a big one. It's too cold. I think it's a big one. We play for fun, cash in quotation marks. So I had to break that out. I love playing golf, watching as well, and it's my coffee mug every morning. So I had to break that out. But the guy I'm really looking at, obviously Koepka, and he's just so dangerous. And same with DeChambeau, they can drive the ball, for miles. So if they can just get into a swing of things, I think both of those guys could definitely be in the end here. But to me, Bubba Watson, what a great story. I know this isn't the Masters where he's won his only, Grand Slams. And then also it's not the early 2010s when he was doing this, but he's been through a lot with mental health. And I know before when he wasn't doing so good, he lost a lot of weight and anxiety, and he just feels and looks just a lot more happier. And he had an amazing round on Friday where he shot, I think, 4 under. And he's a guy, with the pink driver, the bubble gum kind of, plays that, that facade really great. I just love to see, those comeback stories. And he's a great guy too. And if he can go out there, have another few really good rounds, it's really honestly just, I'm happy to see him just smiling and having good rounds in the red. So, shout out to him because, what he's been through over being in the spotlight, then out of the spotlight when he had to deal with mentally, and now having, some success again here. I mean, that's huge, for the sport, and also huge for him because he's a really great guy.
Before we end this segment here, I just want to say, why does FUV not have a golf podcast?
We need one.
We need
Thank
one.
God you said that. We need one. Shout out Mike Calamari because another big golf guy. He's been pushing for that podcast for a while at FUV. I think that would be a great choice. We definitely need one. Thank you, Dylan.
Of course.
For that. But that's going to wrap up, I think, our headline segment here. We're going to take our last break before we are back to talk some NHL playoff hockey here as the Islanders find themselves in the midst of a very big series, the same place they were last year, facing off with the Lightning, with a berth to the Stanley Cup Finals on the line. So stick around. This is 1-on-1 90.7 FM. We'll be right back.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Final segment of the night is NHL hockey. NHL playoffs are always great to watch, especially when you got a local team like the New York Islanders, of course, back where they left off just last year against the Tampa Bay Lightning with a chance to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Andrew, as an Islanders fan yourself, and I know your brother is an even bigger fan, how do you think the Islanders get past this Lightning team the way that they really couldn't do a year ago?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, being from Long Island, you kind of have to be an Islanders fan. I mean, I'm not the biggest hockey fan, but, if I had to pick, you got to go with the Islanders. Always loved going, to the old barn. I live like 10, 15 minutes away. So it's always, nice to see. I feel like the island this is the only team the island has, compared, everyone's always, if it's baseball, it's, you still have, I think Mets probably more on Long Island, but still it's not, the same way the island is, that this is Long Island's team. Mm-hmm. And here, you have them over the last few years, they've been good, which is obviously great. And now back to back, conference finals, I guess technically this is not an Eastern Conference Finals, but whatever it ends up being.
Same idea.
Yeah. I mean, this is just, this Lightning team's really good, and we saw that last year, seeing it again this year, obviously won the Stanley Cup last year. And the Islanders, same thing as last series. They've had trouble scoring goals. I mean, the first 3 games of this series, they only scored 5 goals. You're not going to win, a lot of series, not being able to put the puck in the net. And with this Islanders team, yes, the defense is great. And that scrappy play, the goaltending by Varlamov, it's been great. You look at the New York Saints mantra that was with the Bruins series, that's kind of gone, as, a few calls went against the Islanders, in, I think it was game 2 or game 3, where, Lightning, they're a team, they're going to convert on those penalties. And, they've been, they're a really good team. So the margin of error for the Islanders is pretty small. Again, they have been down in series in the past, and the past 2 series. And that's something that I think Barry Trotz, what a great coach he is, because I feel like as the series goes on over the last few, of the first 2 series of the playoffs, the Islanders have gotten better every single game. And honestly, I think that may be the case here in this one. I think that he's going to have an answer. Now, will it, be the difference? We'll have to see. Obviously, I think this one's kind of obvious. The Islanders have to score more goals. And, they're going to have to, you have Matt Barzal playing so good, and he's setting up chances for everybody, but no one can, find the back of the net really. Even there, I think it was game 3, the one goal they had was, a very scrappy one, so they're going to have to be able to find more consistent ways to score goals, if they're going to want to win the series. And we're going to see what Barry Trotz has up his sleeve here.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about the Islanders getting better as series goes on, maybe not struggling early on, but maybe splitting games and then all of a sudden kind of figuring things out. And that's a big credit to Barry Trotz and his ability to kind of manipulate this line, maybe change a little bit, change things around, maybe change the scheme around, whatever you can do really to get the offense going, because that's definitely the key. It's definitely where that starts. You got to give credit to the Lightning too, a really solid team. So you got to give them credit as well. But for me, it's a credit to Barry Trotz to be able to really adapt and change along with the series as things might start to look like they're going south. Yeah. The Islanders find a way to pull things together and still win series, which I think is really, really huge. And one more thing you mentioned too, like with just being in Long Island, I think even in New York in general, having a hockey team in the playoffs this deep is really good for New York hockey. It's really good for
New York cares about its hockey, I think.
Yeah, and like in general, like playoff hockey, you're going to get a lot more fans in the regular season because a lot of people really love watching playoff hockey. But even more so in New York when the Islanders are good, which they have in the last couple of years, which is huge. You get a lot of people that really care and really want to come out and watch this team in the playoffs. So that's why at the end of the day, if you're living anywhere near New York, I feel like you end up rooting for the Islanders just because they're a scrappy team. Sure, offensively they struggle at times, but you could see them really figuring it out, especially with a good coach like Barry Trotz. And I think really the whole city of New York in general really wants to see them play well and maybe advance here to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, the one thing with the Islanders, which I think is very interesting, I think they're definitely, when you look, they're not the better team than the Lightning. You want to look at skill. I think Lightning had more skill. I think the Bruins had more skill.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the Penguins had more skill they played. And that's, and that's something that the Islanders don't have. I mean, maybe you want to say it's Matt Barzal, but besides, they don't have that just flashy player when like the Bruins, they have, their whole first line is ridiculous. Then, you have the Penguins with Sidney Crosby and what they're doing. And like, you feel like these teams, they all have these stars, and same with the Lightning and the Islanders. They just seem to find a way through defense. And that's like that workman's attitude, I think does, for Long Island does, really, it's definitely relatable. I think throughout the whole the New York grit, it definitely comes into, play. And I think that people want to root for that. And like, they want to root for the underdog that plays solid hockey. It's fun to watch when they're, they're playing sound and you're playing, I guess scrappy is not sound, but, able to just, get it done. And that's the whole thing with playoff hockey. I think every game goes into overtime. Like I've been just watching more of it this year, and like literally every game goes into overtime. And I can't imagine like being a diehard, huge hockey fan and my team's in like the Stanley Cup or
Your heart
Eastern
rate
Cup,
must be going
because the
roof.
game could end at any time in overtime.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, I guess baseball maybe with like a walk-off home run, but it's not the same way. Like if it's bases loaded, no one out, you're kind of expecting to lose.
Yeah.
Or in football, you could see the team drive down the field so quickly. With hockey, one play and you're done and it's over. One
you
bad
saw it
play.
last night in the Vegas Canadiens and Montreal game. That's exactly what happened. It was just a breakaway, and then all of a sudden the game's over. And just like that, the series completely changed.
You can't like, and that's why it's like, because every game is always in playoff hockey so close. I feel like every game goes to OT. You might as well just have, and if it's just, I mean, it's fun to watch, but like, I can't imagine like, like loving like the Islanders much. I love like the Saints or the Mets, and you're on the edge of your seat because literally the game could end any moment. And I'm assuming if you win, the elation of that is insane as well. Yeah. But it's just, that's something about hockey that's really, really fun to watch. And with this Islanders team, I think, look, scoring goals is going to be their biggest thing right now. And I think when it comes to that, I mean, Barzal has played so well over the Bruins series. And then also in the beginning of this series, I think it's going to be, they're going to have to get someone in there. They're going to have Oliver Wahlstrom, the rookie, who played really well in that Penguin series before he got injured. He's probably going to be back in the lineup, going forward here. And I think he should be in that first line. And, he should be in that first line with Barzal. Leo Komarov just has had a really tough beginning to this series and missed like a wide open goal. And, that's something that can't happen. So
yeah, it's terrible.
Again, I feel like that's, it'd be interesting to see, if they play Wahlstrom, if they don't, but I think they need to have consistent offense. I think they can do it. I think Trotz is probably the best coach in the NHL, or one of the best coaches. And, you look at, I feel like whenever the Islanders feel down like a 2-1, and then they were in both series, but even like the Bruins, everyone thought the Bruins would just run away with it. Didn't happen. So I think, it's going to be very pivotal in this series going forward, but this Islanders team is just fun to watch. And, happy that, I'm able to cover the team a little with, FUV as well. It's being from the island, you want to see this team, play well, and they're just, they're fun to watch.
Yeah, they're scrappy, and like you never really count them out of a series. You talked about how they've been down 2-1 plenty of times. Even if they find themselves down 3-1, you can't really count them out because of the coaching of Barry Trotz and because of his ability to really change what needs to be changed to really spark the offense. I think that's the key. If you can find a way to change something with this team to really spark that offense and get them going, then that could be the difference maker. He's done it before, it's happened before, and they've found themselves in this situation and have been able to come back against, like you said, probably better teams. The Bruins for sure were seen as the better team, and it seemed like that was going to be the series once they went up 2-1. It didn't happen. The Lightning are the better team as well. I mean, we'll see what happens, but that this Islanders team is going to fight, and that's really all you can ask for. I know I'm not a fan of the Islanders, and you are a fan, but if you take a step back from being a fan and just look at this objectively, all you can ask for out of your team is to fight and to really give you everything they have.
They do.
That's what they do, night in and night out come playoff time, and that's huge. I mean, before we get out of here too, there is another series, of course, going on in the NHL between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Montreal Canadiens. Canadiens are up 2-1 in that series, which is, I would say, a shock, to be honest. They've been a shock all playoffs so far. But it's also a shock that Vegas is there because Colorado was the team to beat. They were seen as the team that was going to go out and win the Stanley Cup Finals, and it was almost inevitable. So all of a sudden, I should say Eastern Conference, not really, but the Lightning and the Islanders, the winner of that series, put themselves in very good position to maybe win a Stanley Cup, because I don't think there's a clear advantage between Vegas and Montreal in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Vegas was going to win this series, or who knows, they may still will. But I mean, the Canadiens, they're the team. I think they were like kind of like, I guess, like the Islanders. They're the underdog in the first two series. And with Carey Price, I mean, I feel like he's one of the goalies that I think a lot of people know. I think from, obviously he's been great in the NHL, but I think also in like the Olympics and that stuff, he's played well in the past. And I feel like when you have good goaltending, good defense, you could really steal games. And with just the way hockey's played, I mean, that's really what the Canadiens have done. And I think it was their first series when they were able to win like a Game 7, and it was just Price being amazing. And I mean, who knows going forward here? And again, I think Vegas is the better team. I think they have more depth, and I like that. I think they're going to come back and win the series. I think they have good vets like Pacioretty and Fleury, but I don't know. You never really know with hockey. Like, who am I to predict this? Because you never really know. It's
impossible to predict. And that's the thing too with Vegas. I mean, they lost Game 1 to Colorado 7-1.
Yeah.
7-1, and they came back and win that series.
And I'm pretty
So,
sure
like,
the Avs swept their first series. So
yeah.
you
So
know,
it's like, so at that point it was like, it's a no-brainer. You know, the Avalanche are going to move on and probably win the Stanley Cup. But now all of a sudden things are
Yeah.
kind of flipped. But that's hockey. I mean, that's playoff hockey. That's why we watch so
Yeah.
often. That's why it's exciting. Great talking with you, Andrew, on some hockey, of course. You know, good luck to the Islanders going forward. I think everyone in New York is definitely pulling for them, for sure. We got a ton today, you know, starting with baseball, of course, and getting into all things from that to the U.S. Open golf to College World Series. I mean, we were really all over the place, but I think we definitely covered a lot. Great talking with you. I think that's going to just about wrap it up here. It's another great edition of One-on-One, of course. You know, special thanks, of course, to our guest, Yankees reporter Justin Shackil, NBA analyst Brandon Robinson. Great talking with both of them. If you missed any part of our show tonight, you can catch highlights or the entire show if you'd like on our WFUV Sports YouTube page or WFUVSports.org. The sports director at WFUV is Bobby Schafferdini. Big thanks, of course, to our producer, Alex Foles, as always, Dylan Balsamo on the headlines, and my partner, Andrew Galata. I'm Sam Davis. Have a great night. Enjoy your summer, everybody. One-on-One is a production of WFUV.